All right, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy January 4th. We are back on Zoom, back to a virtual meeting platform, and I want to begin with a call to order, starting with, let's see, Corey.
Corey Evans here.
Jean Healy-Dippold here.
Diane Kennedy here.
Carrie Thompson here. And I have my little handy flag for our pledge. If everyone wants to stand and join us for our virtual pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're heading into executive session in 1 minute, but let me just read our virtual meeting language. Since we are back on the Zoom platform, we had a little fun being in person the past couple of months, but we're back. Tonight's meeting will be conducted on Zoom and also live streamed on Cohasset 143 TV and our Facebook page. The public is invited to participate on Zoom, which can be accessed using the link provided at the top of tonight's posted agenda. Members of the board and other scheduled participants will be able to participate when called on by me. Board members will be able to ask questions of any participant, and all votes taken tonight will be by roll call. Any members of the public who wish to ask questions are asked to raise their virtual hand on Zoom, and at my discretion, I will do my best to promote you into the meeting. Please provide your full name and address for public record. Also, please note that comments on platforms other than Zoom will not be monitored, and this meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 TV. The first order of business is executive session for exemption 2, which is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I do declare, and the board will get an update on labor negotiations. So do I have a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved. There we go.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Entering into executive session vote, starting with Corey.
Corey Evans, aye.
Jean Healy-Dippold, aye.
And Kennedy, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye. All right, we will now go into executive session on a separate link, and we will be back on here right at 7 to begin the rest of the meeting.
Carrie, just before we go, you might want to reread the Zoom
language.
platform information and the promotion and everything when we get
I
back.
thought
into
about that
open.
when we come back at 7. Yeah. All right. See everyone in a little. We opened the meeting at 6:30 for an executive session, so we already did the pledge, but I did want to reread our virtual meeting language just to clarify how everything's being done tonight. Our meeting tonight is being conducted on Zoom, but also being live streamed on Cohasset 143 TV and our town Facebook page. The public is invited to participate on Zoom, which can be accessed using the link provided at the top of the posted agenda for tonight's meeting. Members of the board and other scheduled participants who want to participate will be called on by me and will be able to ask questions of any participant, and all votes taken tonight will be by a roll call vote. Any members of the public who wish to ask questions are asked to raise their hand in our virtual room, and at my discretion, I will promote you into the meeting. We want you to provide your full name and address for public record, and also note that comments on platforms other than Zoom will not be monitored. So any comments happening on Facebook, we're not monitoring. And our meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 and our town page. All right. First order of business. Do we have anyone who would like to make a public comment? Please raise your hand. I'm looking in the attendee box right now. Happy to see a lot of viewers tonight, but I do not see any hands raised. All right, no hands, meaning we can move on to our approval of minutes. I believe we have 3 sets, one from 11:09, one from 11:30, and one from 12:14. Diane.
I just wanted to say, I didn't see the 1214 in the packet. If I missed it, I apologize, but
No, I wasn't there.
They were not completed. My apologies. They're not
Okay.
finished.
okay.
They had
So
technical errors.
otherwise, I'm happy to move approval of the minutes of November 9th and November 30th.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote on approving these 2 minutes. Let's see, I don't see Jack in here. He's probably coming in, but roll call vote starting with Corey.
Corey Evans, aye.
Jean Haley Dipple Dye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Carrie Thompson, I. All right, minutes from 11:09 and 11:30 are approved. Moving on to our community health update. We did not have this for a couple months, but as everyone knows, with the state of the world and the state of our town, we are back with a community health update. Everyone's in here right now. Pam, hi. Mary, hi. Glenn, hi. Chief Quigley, hi. Good to see everyone. I know that this has just been, a brutal few weeks watching the numbers spike back up again in town and everywhere, really in the state and country. So wanting to get an update from all of you, how things are going. I know we have a couple more booster clinics coming up in town and regionally. So who wants to get us started? Maybe Pam or Mary?
Madam Chairperson.
Or Chief Sylvia, you're here too. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No issues.
The big screen tonight of Facebook.
I was just gonna say, yeah, we've had a meeting earlier today and we had a little
Okay.
quick discussion, and I think I'm gonna kick this off with Pam. Pam's done some PowerPoint slides that she can share with everybody.
Great.
And then we've got a few other little odds and ends we'd like to touch on, and then we're obviously happy to answer any questions at the end.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chief. Pam, the floor is yours.
Do you want me to show this? Do you want me to show the slide deck you sent, Pam, or you want to do it yourself?
Yeah, that would be great. If you want to show them for me. Okay. So we
Yeah,
could just go to the
thank you.
first slide,
Second.
seconds. Okay, so just kind of a general overview right now of the Omicron virus. That's what we're dealing with right now. And this is like what we've been learning so far. So in Massachusetts, the Broad Institute determined that 80% of the new cases were the Omicron variant. That was just really quickly, it just kind of swept in and replaced the Delta variant. So the steep increase in cases that we've seen throughout the state and also reflected here in Cohasset supports the presence of Omicron, since it's more contagious than Delta. But fortunately, the symptoms are also milder. So the primary symptoms that people are finding with Omicron are sore throat and severe headache. One of the differences is that the Delta, there was more virus in the nose, and the Omicron, there's more virus in the back of the throat. The doctors have seen a reinfection after infection with Delta, even within 90 days. So before, when you had Delta or previous variants, there was some level of immunity once you've had the virus. The Omicron seems to be breaking right through any kind of previous immunization that you receive from having the virus. And the incubation period is shorter for Delta, shorter than Delta in the previous variant. So once you've been exposed to somebody, the onset of symptoms comes very quickly. Next slide, please. So to get to Cohasset specifically, if we go back to 2020, November is like 35 cases, November 2020, see the gray box. And so after the Thanksgiving holiday, the cases really spiked up in December. We saw 95 of them. And then we really peaked out at 116 in January. And if we jump over to 2021, in that same similar gray box, that's November, that's 69 cases. So it basically doubled from 35 to 70. And now in December, we just saw this huge spike on 196. And the thing you have to remember is the 69 and the 196, these are probably way underestimated, because these are only confirmed PCR cases. there's been so many more home test kits and antigen tests, then they're not included in this. So the cases have really, really spiked up, and it's really due to Omicron. Next slide. So what are the mitigation measures that we're doing? So luckily, we received a pretty large grant from DPH, and it really wasn't supposed to be to combat the virus. It was really supposed to be more like a big picture, get us to get regional services with other towns, you know, fill in gaps in services. But I told DPH that, you know, we have 6 months to spend this money and we're going to just throw it all at fighting this virus. So one of the first things we've been doing is booster clinics, and this is actually without any additional money because we get free vaccine through the state. So in Cohasset, we did 5 booster clinics in November and December, and now we have another booster clinic planned in January 10th, which is next Monday from 1 to 4 at Wilcott. And we are going to actually use some money to do a regional drive-through clinic at the Baptist Church in Hingham. The good thing with that is you don't have to get out of your car. I think that people in Cohasset have been boosted by and large. We saw really good attendance in those first 5 clinics that we did. We're not seeing a lot of people signing up, and I think hopefully that's a good sign for the latest one to come up at Wilcott. I think maybe that's because most people have gotten boosted already. But if you want to sign up for any of these clinics, you can go right to the Cohasset Town website and they'll link you over to the registration links. So one of the things we've been anxious to get our hands on, just like everybody else, has been test kits. Up until recently, we haven't had the opportunity to do that. Now that we've got the money, we can purchase them. And the state actually didn't even offer them to us as communities until right around Christmas time. They did this open procurement that was supposed to get us deals. Turns out everybody's already jumped on it, and there isn't a great supply, but luckily we've had Michelle Leary working on the case today, and she is going to be able to get us a bunch of test kits. And because we're not going to be able to get like one for every family in town, we're going to primarily use them to keep critical services open, like public safety, DPW, food establishments. Like we'll offer them to the supermarkets, you know, to test their employees if they need to, just to kind of keep everything up and running. And we're estimated to get our first shipment at the end of this week, and then a remaining batch early next week. Now, again, this is going to be through our regional grant money. So we are going to divide up the kits that we get between Cohasset, Hingham, Hull, and Scituate. That's our regional public health group. And then Hingham is going to step up and help us do a regional drive-through testing site. And again, this is going to be open to our new regional public health partners. And it's going to be located on 3A in Hingham. It's going to be near the Fresh Market. It's drive-through, it's appointment only. It's going to be open 4 days per week. We're hoping it's going to open up on January 13th. It's still being negotiated with the same company that Hingham used last year that had that Cushing Street site. I think they've sold off that site, and so they own another building on 3A, and that's where it's going to be. So more info to come on the regional drive-through, but we do hope to have this PCR testing site up soon. Next slide. So one final thing we've also been doing with the grant money is that we've tried to add some additional staff. So the state used to have a group called the CTC, which was a Contact Tracing Collaborative, and this was open to every city and town in the state of Massachusetts. So when the local health departments got overloaded with COVID cases, they could send their cases to this CTC and they would do contact tracing. Well, unfortunately, the state ended the CTC in December 23rd, right before Christmas and right before the big surge, or right as the surge was happening. So we've tried to hire back some of those people and actually try to form our own little mini CTC for our little regional partners that we've just established. So because the number of cases is completely overwhelming, the contact tracing in deep detail as it was done previously is really now kind of pivoting to just trying to explain to people the isolation and quarantine guidance and moving on, and not trying to track down every single one of their close contacts and calling them. And because the guidance just kind of keeps changing, this is actually where you can just go and read it in detail if you need to know. That you can go to mass.gov, to the DPH website, or you can go to the ctc.gov. But the basic essence of it is that they've reduced the time that you need to be in isolation or quarantine from 10 days to 5 days. But there's caveats with that. Like you can't have a fever, and you can't really be, symptomatic. So, tune into these websites for details, but that's the gist of that for now. And I think that's it for slides.
Okay. Thank you, Pam. I know that there have been a lot of concerns about availability for testing and being able to purchase the at-home tests, and people are worried about that. So it's good that we'll be getting some, at least for certain people that need it in town. But I know that that's been a big frustration for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions for Pam or Chief Sylvia? Do you
We can answer questions for Pam right now, and then we're gonna jump over to Mary for a quick update, but questions are obviously acceptable.
Diane, I see your hand.
Just a quick question on that regional testing site. Is that going to be a PCR test? And also, is that something that they would be able to provide some kind of certification that you were tested? Having brought somebody to the airport that needed a certified test.
There's going to be PCR tests available, and also there are going to be some antigen tests available as well. The PCR test is more formal, and it does and it ends up like in a state database. Hey, Mary, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would like to comment on that. So the PCR test is what's required for schools, and so that's why we chose to go with this test site, and they will offer, this will be PCR testing. So we'll go into the state database. I will get those reports. So it will be reflected in our numbers.
And just a
Right.
follow-up, will people be able to get some kind of certified document that says they've been officially tested if they needed that
Yes.
for travel?
Yes, yep.
Okay. I know that pharmacies were doing those official PCR documents too, but I think they've been pretty overloaded. We have
Yeah.
one question from the audience from Paul Kearse asking, are they still recommending booster shots 6 months after second shot? If so, are their clinics scheduled for February? And we were just mentioning clinic schedule, but in terms of the recommendations, is it still 6 months? I heard it might be 5 now, or a little bit shorter than that for people to get boosters.
So I can answer that. So the answer to that is today, FDA changed the guidance, and for Pfizer, if you got Pfizer as your first 2 doses, you're now eligible to go 5 months and get a booster dose, right? But it's only for Pfizer.
Okay.
And are we going to schedule clinics in February? It's going to depend on the demand. This clinic we have coming up next week, the 10th, is, it's only not really heavily attended. So we'll vaccinate as long as we need to. We're happy to do that. We can get the vaccine, and we're happy to do it.
And I will say too, we were kind of ahead of our partners. We've done a lot more vaccine clinics than the rest of them. So there's probably still going to be a regional demand. So maybe if we don't have them at Wilcott, there'll still be like regional ones that you could attend.
Okay, Corey?
Yeah, and everyone, thanks for, kind of jumping back on the wagon here and kind of, again, we thought we were over and here we are back in the middle of it. I think that the biggest question I have, and obviously if I read the data correctly, the biggest thing drawing down our vaccinated population are children. I do know that, our clinics are 18 plus, and I know there's a lot of, hiccups with, needing pediatric nurses and whatnot. Is there any conversations going on with the schools about assisting them or working with them to try to do, offer something for those that are under 18? Or is that really just so difficult it can't be done? We really can't help them.
Yeah, so that's a very challenging group, right? The 5 to 11-year-olds. And I think they are best served in the medical home, which would be at their pediatric provider. We have not gotten Pfizer vaccine, and I would say that that particular group should really go to their pediatrician. And I know that there may be some issues with pediatricians, but that would be that's my advice on that. They really should be served in the medical home for that.
And
Okay,
just
yeah,
to
'cause
clarify, yeah, sorry, Corey, because our clinics that we have been having in town have been Moderna, correct?
Or Moderna 18
Yeah.
plus, yep.
Yeah, I just, I know that pediatricians are, booked out for months. I've heard, and again, my children are, my son's not yet quite 5, but, so, I think getting whatever resources we can to kind of move that, process forward. I think the schools really is kind of the place we're most vulnerable at this point. So, keep your ear to the ground, Mary. And if there's something we can think of, I think that goes a long way to bringing the whole community forward on this.
Yep.
Thank you.
I agree.
Thanks, Corey. Jean?
Yeah, so I would echo Corey's thanks to everyone, unfortunately, for having to be again on the screen discussing this, but thank you nonetheless. I think on the pediatric, and again, to echo Corey's request too, on seeing what we can do on the pediatric vaccine, having a child that's in the 5 to 11 range, it is not easy at all to get vaccinated within the Cohasset area. You can go to a big site in Brockton and these aren't like in your doctor's office. This is you line up in a cattle call with everyone else. And it's actually pretty efficient for people who have children that are turning 5 in order to get shots. And there's other places, but those other places are closing down, like Walgreens and CVS, because they don't have staff in order to administer the vaccine, as we've seen through Walgreens. And so for those children, particularly those that are aging in, it seems like trying to get them vaccinated as quickly as possible. If there's an ability to do so here, and partnering with the schools would be really helpful, including to help reduce the rates of spread too, because I just know the other options are not great. And it's not necessarily, unfortunately, in their pediatrician's office, given the issues that the pediatrician's office is facing, just trying to even get kids tested, which is very hard.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with both Jean and Corey. Go ahead, Mary.
No, understood. I hear what you're saying. It's it's not easy, right? So we're all in this together and trying to vaccinate as we can. And I hear what you're saying.
Well, I think our nursing staff is really out straight right now, trying to handle all the cases. We could look see what the cost would be to get some kind of mobile unit maybe to go with school. So we'll take this back and we'll look into it.
Okay. Jack, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I just want to say I continue to be impressed with the ability of our small town to provide such high quality services. We have dedicated professionals and Pam and Mary and everybody else and the people over at Wilcott. It's just a very, very good, and I'm very proud of Cohasset. So just a shout out to all of you and a profound thank you.
Yeah, Pam and Mary, this has just been unending. I know, and I know everyone is exhausted. So thank you again, everyone that has been part of this and that we're back doing community health updates. Let's see, either of the chiefs or Glenn.
Madam Chairman, I think Glenn had some updates from MEMA, and I wanted just to make a comment that you see Mary, Pam, me, Chief Quigley, Glenn, now you see Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
This is truly a team effort and has been since day one. And when Selectman Creighton comments about the fact that our little town, well, the people that you see here and all the people that assist us are the ones that make us, as to use Chris's favorite term, punch well above our weight class. So we've been out in front of this since the get-go. And as Pam just mentioned about the test kits, we needed a little help trying to find these things, and we knocked on Michelle's door, or Pam knocked on Michelle's door, and we're off and running. So at the same time, Glenn's been working his little magic through MEMA, and I think he's probably got an update or two about where we stand on our PPE and other things MEMA related.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief, Madam Chairman. So our supplies of PPE have been in great shape. Recently, the school department had been our biggest user, but we're able to keep up with it. The vendors are providing material in a timely manner. Michelle's able to procure those. And we have a huge backup with our partners at MEMA. They have millions of pieces of almost everything in their Franklin warehouse. So good shape there. MEMA also broke loose some test kits, and the Department of Education distributed 360 test kits to the schools over the weekend. The original promise was that there would be two tests for each employee, of which the school department has 350, and they got 360 tests. So not quite as advertised, but at least we have over 300 tests in our hands right today. Like you heard earlier, Michelle has got some supplies coming in later on in the week from sources that she had for test kits. Through MEMA, I have another 180 kits, which should be arriving here in the next couple of days also. So I think we're in very good shape on that. Many of the test kits are funded through various different government programs. FEMA will pay for some, public health is paying for some. So I think we should use them as we see fit and not worry about being able to afford them, because we got lots of partners helping us with that. So I think we're in great shape there, and we shouldn't worry about anything just now. The other thing that I'm sure has come up in people's minds over the last couple of years is how much is this all costing? And the fact is a lot. But Don Payette and myself work almost every week on the different ways to take federal and FEMA funding to pay for it. We're cautious as to how we classify things that we buy so that we'll be eligible. And so we're in very good shape there. We've been taking advantage of every nickel of government money that's out there, and it's gotten us through most of this. So that's a good thing. And we still have our state of emergency in place, which your board decided to keep in place a number of months ago, which is a good thing. It gives us a ability to make quick decisions, make the right decisions in order to respond without having to worry about whether we're at odds with certain government regulations or procedures like that. So it's a good thing. So I think, unanimously would encourage you to keep that in place. It's helpful, doesn't hurt for sure. But in general, I think from the emergency management side, we've been able to keep up with what everybody's needed, and we should be okay in the foreseeable future. So thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, it seems almost like forever ago that we did originally put that state of emergency in place a couple of years ago, and we're getting close to the 2-year deadline, and here we are. It still is a state of emergency. So thank you, Glenn. It's good to hear that we're doing good on the PPE front. I know everyone wishes we had more tests, but it seems like we at least are going to have enough for certain populations and people that need them, which is good to hear.
Well, I think that will break loose within 2 weeks, probably. That'll bottleneck will break loose, and there'll be plenty available for us to decide what the best thing to do is.
Okay. And again, special shout out to Michelle too. Anyone who's worked with Michelle knows how fantastic she is, but thank you for helping with that too, Michelle. Chief Quigley, hi.
Hey there. Just to explain some of the back end of this, Glenn is being modest, but he has created a complete shipping and receiving operation in the basement of the Deer Hill School. And if, any of the board members get a chance to get out and see, they had to build, walls in a room so it's secure, but there's actually a process, things are scanned in and, logged in, and that's the whole back end of this operation, which people may not, realize is happening. This stuff has to be accounted for, and at some point, as Chris beats into us that the auditors are going to ask about this, probably in 3 or 4 years when when everybody's moved on. That was his experience with Sandy in New York. So it's quite an operation, and I see it pretty often. And we just ordered supplies. I ordered supplies, PPE, the other day, and a pallet of stuff magically shows up, and we restock everything. But we're starting to burn through things again. But it's nice to have those things on hand, and Michelle out there hunting for it. So it's everybody sees us on camera, but there's a whole back end to this operation, which includes Michelle and Dawn and Glenn and others.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Chief. I totally agree. Glenn, thank you for all of that work you've done on that end. Any other questions for any of our experts here? All right, it looks like until further notice, we will be having community health updates on future agendas. Jean, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I did have one question. Maybe I should table this, Chris, until you do your town manager update. But, given the predictions that we're probably going to peak in 2 weeks from now, and a lot of people are probably going to be sick, including some of us, I do wonder about how that sort of butts up against the request that we have for people to get in warrant items and things like that. If we have, a lot of employees that are out sick, I don't have a good sense of if we currently have a lot of employees out sick right now. And so I just want to be mindful of that dynamic, and you might know better.
That's an excellent point. So we've been talking internally about ways to keep ourselves protected. So for example, you're not going to see Chief Sylvia and Assistant Chief Dockery in the same room soon, or Chief Quigley and Lieutenant Lennon and Lieutenant Lopes. We're keeping people strategically separate. I mean, you'll see us like this, the same thing internally. So we're trying to, one DPW worker per car, where, the masks have been imposed in town hall and all of our public buildings at the decision of the Board of Health for a couple of months. We're maintaining all of that. So we're really trying to be to listen to everyone and to play it safe. We're not closing anything. The buildings are still open. People can still come in and do their government services. And we're trying to stay on top of that. So we've really pushed the clinics too. Every employee who needs to get boosted, and their families. I mean, this is not, there's room available too, so we've asked people to get that done. We're trying to make, there's masks in every building, there's extra PPE. And again, when we've needed to, we've tried to keep people separated, particularly, we're peaking, you're right, over the next few weeks. One of the nice things is that we've developed a little bit of an ability to do some of this, like meeting like this electronically. So the recommendation from the Board of Health has been that all the committees go to virtual meetings for at least the next month, just to be safe. And we don't have big deadlines until February. And again, worst comes to worst, if we can, the board is empowered to move the dates of town meeting until it's locked. You can always move it. I think you can still move it under so again, we're not till May 2nd. That said, the deadlines are going to come up on us, but it's an excellent point, and we're trying to do everything we can to keep safe, to keep people separated, and to do things virtually where we can. At the same time, respecting that people still need to come in, do business, and transact. So and we're going to keep watching it. We've had some outbreaks. I'm not going to tell you there haven't been people have been before Christmas. We had a little wave of it. So we actually caught it a little ahead, and trying to stay on top of it. And Mary has been a tremendous resource here in the building for staff, and Pam, and to try to keep people safe. So knock on.
Yeah,
I think we're doing okay so far.
Diane, did you have your hand up?
I'm gonna wait. It was just about.
You just muted yourself.
Yeah, I'll wait till
Okay.
select board comment later.
Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? Sean Galvin is asking if anyone's heard about the winter semi-formal dance. It's supposed to take place on January 21st. I don't know anything about that. I don't know if anyone does, but we can look into it, Sean. I'm not sure if anyone here has heard about that.
Carrie, I was going to invite you.
Well, I'm flattered, Jack. I'm flattered. All right,
You have to
Sean,
still turn me down. Huh? Sure.
let's find out if it's happening first. I don't know the answer, Sean, but we'll look into it. Thanks for always coming to our meetings, Sean. You're a great audience member. All right. I believe we will have another community health update on our agenda for the 18th. So fingers crossed that our spikes do not keep going up on that straight line on the graph. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you, everyone here who is working every day to keep our town healthy and safe. All right. A couple of you are staying. I believe Glenn Pratt and Chief Sylvia are staying for our next agenda item, which is our fire chief recruitment process update, and then an emergency management update from both Chief Sylvia and Director Pat Pratt.
Thank you, Carrie. So just a quick update for the board. We received 18 applicants for the chief's position. And by the way, just to preface this, I am at the top of the list of people who do not want to see Chief Sylvia go. There's a mandatory retirement law in the state of Massachusetts, which requires safety officers to retire. I believe, Chief, it's the 30th day of the month at which you turn 65. Is that how it reads?
That is correct. Last day of the month.
Despite that, I this is one of those times I like to get a fake ID.
Yeah, we've thought about trying to figure out how to lie about your age, Chief.
So unfortunately, this day has been coming. So the search process we're in is not something we want to do, but it's something that we're required to do. As I say that, the chief's been really integral in helping us frame questions and recruit candidates. So 18 people initially applied. We did a vet first look, brought it down to 6. We did some screening interviews the week between Christmas and New Year's. And we have 4 finalists that are going to the assessment center later this month. So we're excited about that. They're 4 really strong candidates. And that assessment center is an interactive. I think if you remember when Bernie Lynch and Jack Parrow spoke with the board last month, it's an interactive process where people go through, they test communication skills, leadership skills, conflict resolution skills. You act out, write out, review problems in real time. So it's a really interactive process. We're excited that Chief Parrow, who I know Chief Sylvia knows from, is a retired chief who's leading that process. So we're excited about that. And then after that, we'll go to another interview process with some department heads and other folks, just to get a fit and feel for any of the finalists. With the goal of, after people are vetted and reviewed, to get a candidate to the board, hopefully in February, late February. That's the timetable we're on, and we're still working that way. So so that's been a really good, strong process. And again, I want to thank everyone who's participated, particularly Miriam, for all the work behind the scenes to make this go. And the search firm has really done a nice job of really reaching out there and getting some really high quality candidates who really were impressive in some of the early conversations we've had. So I'm optimistic the class will be well served. Not as well served as we could keep Chief Sylvia from retiring. We can't have that as much as I'd like it to be. So in parallel with that, we've been really fortunate, and I've been fortunate since the very first day. I came to a EOC session during a storm before I even started. It was like a week or 2 before I started. I called up and I drove through a snowstorm and came up and went to this great EOC in the basement of Deer Hill. And it was Glenn and Chief Sylvia and Bill Quigley and a whole bunch of folks talking about Joyce and Carl. A bunch of folks were talking about the storm, what was going on. It was quite a big storm, actually. And I actually stayed at the Costa Harbor Inn. And what was impressive was the whole team concept. And I've been able to have a front row seat to that for the last 8 years. And the pandemic has been part of that. Really, testing, and it's really been a very unique, great team. And replacing, the emergency management leads. I mean, Glenn and Chief Sylvia have grown up in town. They've known each other forever, and they know everything there is to know. And well, as a formal process for when the chief retires, there isn't that one for emergency management. And it's going to be super critical that whoever gets hired really gets to be brought on and Glenn gets to mentor them. And again, I hope that Glenn stays as long as he wants. My hope is that he will continue to serve the town in the capacity he has so well, again, for as long as he's willing and able. That said, we also have to look at what happens next. And so the chief and Glenn and I talked about that too. So it's just kind of in parallel. Just, we have to think about what happens next. So it's not happening tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But at some point, we have to just think about how we continue to evolve. There's a great team, and teams have changed too. I mean, in the past, and at some point they will too. Again, like I said, I hope Glenn stays as long as he wants, as long as he's willing and able. That said, the next fire chief has to be able to have strong emergency management skills, because the fire chief historically here and other places leads the field work in an emergency to a large extent, and partners. One of the great things about this is no one of us could ever have done all of this by themselves. The work that Glenn has done, the work that Bill has done, the work that people we don't see, the CERT folks that do all the volunteer, it's amazing. And no one person could have ever done that. And the fact that we have a great team is something I want to really maintain. It's critical that we do that. And I'm excited about that. So again, I don't know if Chief or Glenn have anything they want to add, but there's never there's no hard. The only hard transition we know is coming is with Chief Sylvia. And really incumbent that it's going to be critical that Glenn help bring a new chief up to speed. And then, again, and we continue to build and evolve. The EOC has even evolved. We didn't plan to be Glenn is like the quartermaster during, quartermasters, making sure that we're on top of MEMA. Just think of MEMA as a full-time.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of future planning to go on, and I think we've been talking about that. So Chief Glenn, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I would love to hear both of your thoughts, Chief and Glenn, because you both have worked for so many years on this. Do you feel like this current model is still working for the town moving forward? What do you think we need that maybe we don't have? Kind of give us your thoughts, I guess, on how to best move forward with these positions.
So I'll jump in real quick. This has been a 20-year process with Glenn Pratt and Bob Sylvia. We didn't develop this team of the two of us overnight. And Glenn is the emergency management director. I'm the deputy emergency management director, which basically means that Glenn gets to run all the administrative stuff, gets all the heavy lift as far as MEMA and everything else. And I get to go out and play in the storms and do everything else. It's imperative that, well, I won't say it's imperative. What I'd like to say, I guess, is that what you see and what you've seen for storms and storms and storms, and then a pandemic, is a team. And this team, Glenn has been the manager of this team pretty much for 20 years. He built the CERT program. He built out the EOC. He's done some incredible work. Whoever comes in and sits in my seat needs to understand that, I love to use the term, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this is not broken. We, the town of Cohasset, have been incredibly well served by emergency management for the last 20 years. And the last evidence has been the last 2 years of the pandemic. The things that we've accomplished, and you hear us talk about the booster clinics and everything else. We are so far out in front of our neighboring communities and have been for the last 18, 20 months. I think, I'm just proud to be part of the team that has pulled this off so far. I wish it was over. Never thought that I'd be the incident commander of something that lasted for 20 months or 22 months or 24 months or whatever it might be. By the time it's over, and by the way, it started on March 16th, so that ruined St. Patrick's Day. But the bottom line is that, what you see is a very well-oiled machine, and it works because everybody works at it. It's not just the two guys you see here on the camera right now, but everybody else. The entire team at Cohasset Emergency Management, the CERT volunteers, you name it. This is just a great team. So I'm just proud to be part of it.
Well said, Chief. Glenn, would love to hear your thoughts.
I echo almost everything the chief says, and I just add a little bit of a history flair to it because that's kind of my thing, But back in 1950, when the federal government passed the Civil Defense Act, the town jumped right on board and appointed an 18-member Civil Defense Advisory Council. It worked for 3 years, and then the town spent the equivalent in today's dollars of $150,000 to set up a civil defense department. They appointed retired Army Colonel Walter Lillard to be the director for many years. And so we also, during that time, were one of the towns that was selected to have a full surgical hospital pre-positioned, and it was put in the high school basement for 30 or 40 years. And then the feds came and picked it up, if you can believe it. But anyway, so we've been in the forefront. It's worked well. I think that the original concept of setting up its own department, its own agency, still works well for us. I was asked shortly after 9/11 to help the then director, Arthur Lear, who was an older gentleman, bring the town's plans and civil defense, emergency management operation into compliance with the new Homeland Security, FEMA, and those regulations are coming down. And like the chief says, you know, some of us have been shoulder to shoulder working on this for 20 years. And I think if you check around, you'll find that in our peer group of towns, we are way out in front, just in our preparedness, and just in the fact that our small town, we have a budget for emergency management. Many towns, they don't. Just an also ran, and I think it shows with the things we're able to do and how we're able to help the community when emergencies come up. But it is it's even without this last 2 years, it's a job that takes 10 to 15 hours a week, no matter how you slice it. You know, as you can imagine, there's lots of higher level government requests and, you know, mandates and things you got to do and should do. And, you know, if you follow the planning, which pays off, trust me, there's a lot of stuff you see on the street when a storm or emergency happens. It's not because we thought about how to respond that morning. You know, we talk about these things all the time and we worry about them. And, you know, we had been asked by the federal government many years ago to set up a system of how we could deliver medicine to our citizens, vaccinations and like that. We practiced it, we drilled it, we had supplies for it, and who knew one day Mary would have to actually roll this stuff out and do it, albeit that we used a different building, but it was still the same concept. So there's a lot that's gone into it, and nobody does it alone. But the cooperation, the team we have, and we've continued to build over the last 20 years, it's great stuff. And I think as we take a hard look at it going forward, we most likely will decide what we got going is the way to continue. But we'll see. Let's do one thing at a time. Let's get the chief on board.
Yep.
Get him up to speed, get the old chief retired, and you know, then we'll see where we go.
Glenn, your institutional memory and knowledge of history is really invaluable, which is why it's so critical to have you helping transition these new positions. And especially, not that you're replaceable, but when we find someone maybe to do what you're doing now, to be able to have you help transition that person, I think is critical. All right, I see 3 hands up. Before I get to questions, just a technical question for Tracy and Justine. I'm getting a few questions from audience members that the format of the meeting on our TV channel and Facebook is not where everyone can see all the boxes. It's where they're only seeing a big screen of whoever is talking. I'm not sure why that is. Is there a way to fix the format?
It seems like that would be their own format.
That's what I thought, but apparently it's on TV right now. That's what's happening.
Okay, we'll check.
Okay.
Sherry, are you
Check
talking
on
about
that.
TV or Facebook? Because I think those are kind of different streams. If it's TV, I can obviously text the director and see what's up. If it's Facebook, that's a little
Those of
different.
you who are messaging me, let me know if it's TV or Facebook. I've gotten a few questions about it now.
Okay, thanks.
Hold on. It's fixed now. Okay, people are saying it just got fixed. Excellent.
Magic.
All right, fabulous. All right, I saw 4 hands up. All of my board members' hands up. Okay, I think Jack, I believe you were first, and then I think Corey, and then Diane and Jean.
Yeah, hi. Well, you know, thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Chief Sylvia. You've both done an excellent job. And I think listening to both of you, it's really kind of interesting because it jives very clearly with what I've found by, you know, looking into the different roles. I've spoken to some senior state level people who are in charge of emergency management. And the conclusion is that fire and emergency management are really distinct disciplines, and they do different things. So they don't necessarily merge well. And if you try to merge them frequently, what happens is one of them gets shortchanged, and the skill set for emergency management is not the same skill set necessarily for Chief Sylvia. So it's clear. We also have some, quite frankly, we have some technical issues in that the town bylaws very specifically state that the emergency director is a direct appointment by the select board, whereas the fire chief is a completely separate appointment in which the town manager selects and then requires select board approval. They are separate things. And I happen to look on the emergency management marketplace, which is the official listing. And I see that this has been listed as, right, to serve as, I directly quote, as fire chief and emergency manager director. And without getting too far into the weeds, and I think, Chris, you'll be able to correct this, these applicants have applied for a job under some pretty strict employment regulations that is a double job. So we really need to correct that as soon as possible, because number one, it's not legally permissible to do it this way. They're separate things. And unless we want to go to town meeting and change the bylaws, we can't do it. So just as a technical thing, I think, Chris, it would be helpful if you could correct that. But overall, what I was impressed with both highly qualified Chief Sylvia and Emergency Director Pratt have both come to the same conclusion, which is it's a great system. It works well. It's a complementary system, and the town is well served. We've had the additional benefit of having two exemplary people holding those positions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Corey, you were next.
Yeah, my first comment is just a warning to Glenn. After chasing Chief Sylvia many times into downtown on his bike, I would never call him Old Chief because you may get a bike to the face. But that out of the way, Chief, again, sorry that you got to leave us in this capacity, but I think you deserve some time to recreate. You've taken care of us for so many years, and thank you, Glenn, as well. On the topic of whether or not we are looking, we should be looking for a fire chief. I think I'm not quite sure if I fully understand some of the concerns, but the idea that we look for a fire chief that doesn't have emergency management experience doesn't really make much sense to me. So obviously, being part of an emergency team is vital to kind of what we're looking for a fire chief. And going forward, obviously we want to be sure the town is protected, and that's really our main goal here. So that's my only thought is I'm fully behind the idea that we need to have emergency management experience for our fire chief. If Glenn wants to continue this thing for the next 50 years, that's great, but we do also have to at least have in the building enough experience to guide us with the next chapter, whatever we decide to do. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Corey. Diane?
I'm just going to jump on the kudos to Chief Sylvia and Glenn for their work, particularly over the past 18, 19 months. And one of the things that came to mind was when we declared the state of emergency on March 16th of 2020, we had no idea. None of us had any idea what we were dealing with. And then as things progressed and got complicated, and a number of times we asked whether we should withdraw the state of emergency, because a lot of communities were doing that. And Glenn, to his credit, kept saying, nope, we don't need to, and it could give us some advantages if we don't. And here we are. We did not do that. We listened to him, and I think that was just an incredible call. And again, that's the kind of call that gets made when you know what you're doing and you have experience and you've got good partners with you. So I just wanted to say that.
Well said, Diane. I agree. And some other towns did end up lifting their state of emergencies, and I hear they regret that decision. So you're right. That was a critical call that we all made. Thank you to Glenn and Chief Sylvia. Jean.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Glenn, for the very interesting history that I wasn't aware of. And really all of you, including the others that are part of this effort, for your foresight in, for example, vaccine planning. It's a good thing we you had that foresight to do exactly what we have been doing. One thing that I would say, well, first I do agree with Corey that we need a fire chief with emergency management experience. I think that's, probably sort of an obvious thing, particularly where he's in charge of addressing emergencies. That said, it seems like we do benefit from having this, and Glenn, I would be curious, and maybe this is a discussion for a later day, but what the sort of true scope of the work is that you do and all the different things that you do to really make sure that that's fully understood and we can benefit from all of this wisdom sort of going forward. And in a very practical way, one thing that I think we would all really benefit from on the select board is next week, or maybe it's the week after, we have a communications working group that we're trying to do. And, I've noticed one thing, having recently joined the select board, that is tricky is trying to figure out how to communicate during an emergency, i.e. the storms. That is a pain point for us. And I'm curious as to people's thoughts on how we can manage that. And some things we just can't manage. I mean, there's just some realities to the situation, but we have a huge amount of new residents that are struggling to figure out what to do, where to go, how to do all of that. And so this is really topical too, as we head into the winter season, trying to figure out how to maneuver all of that. And so I think to the extent that even based on your experience, you could provide us some guidance or suggestions, including some better ways to do things based on what you've seen, that would be really helpful given your long, range view of what you've seen over the years. And thank you.
Yeah. That's supposed to be our meeting next week. Hold on, Glenn. Jean, that is supposed to be our meeting next week, talking about communication in general, which is our biggest select board goal. So we can discuss maybe inviting Glenn and the chiefs to come talk about it. I know Chief Quigley is really good at social media. I'll give you a shout out, Chief Quigley, but you're right. In terms of just communicating, especially in terms of emergencies and with emergency level information to the town, we're trying to do better, and it would help to get feedback on that. Glenn, I interrupted you, I think.
I would just say, certainly I will put together a package for the board as to what goes on in our agency and why. But on the communications part, we're happy to jump in on that. In our after action meetings on the windstorm that happened in October, that was a big topic. And we have a few suggestions we're working on more. And in fact, we do have a whole slate of suggestions, which we'd like to get before your board at some time, things that could help us going forward. Communications being way up at the top. So we're happy to help.
Okay. And again, just to reiterate, Chief Sylvia and Glenn, neither of you are replaceable. And it's impossible to fill either of your shoes, especially you two together communicating. That we can't replicate that, right? So I think as a board and as a town, we're trying to figure out, obviously we need to hire a wonderful fire chief, and I'm sure these candidates are great, and we need to move on with that first. But how do we get future partnerships and positions of people in these positions to work as well as you two have, and as well as the town has been working, the past few years? So that's our goal, and it's hard to do, but we're lucky that we have you both here helping with any type of transition as well.
One of the very, very, very quickly, one of the things that Chris and Glenn and I had a chance to talk, and one of the comments that was made by me to Glenn was that he needs to write his own job description.
Yes.
Because none of us have a clue to everything he does. And at some point, somebody's going to have to walk in some really big shoes. So it would be nice if he kind of brought us all up to speed on exactly what is the emergency management director's job description.
Yes, that's your homework, Glenn. Do you hear that?
I got it. Yeah, right. One of the things came up a little earlier in the meeting was talking about, I think Chris was talking about it, how much everyone's done, how hard it's been. And one thing that keeps coming to mind to me is, the chiefs, procurement, public health, all those people, they all have regular full-time jobs that they had to do also. Emergency management, all we had to do was concentrate on emergency. So, lot of town department heads and a lot of folks who were on the screen earlier have been doing double duty for a couple of years, but we made it work. So.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Okay, any final thoughts or questions on this? Chris, any final thoughts on this?
I'm good. I think you know, we're moving in a good direction, and I think you know, again, the town's been really blessed for a very long time, and it's gonna and I you know, I think that the proof, even just tonight, right? Not expected to be back where we were today, right? But we had a meeting earlier today, and we walked through the whole testing and booster stuff. And you know, as Glenn said, you know, we've trained and planned. He and I were talking a month before the pandemic, and he set up a tabletop exercise on a pandemic type situation.
Wow.
Of course, it never happened because the pandemic
Really happened.
Right.
Yeah. So you know, it's those conversations that happen regularly, and I agree. You know, having someone who focuses on this is really critical now.
Mhm.
Time, unfortunately, as they broke the mold with Chief Silva, they broke the mold with Glenn. So you know, and we have to find ways of you know, that as we go forward. And again, I don't have answers. I mean, as you said, Carrie, there's a lot of conversations to have. And one of the things that I think we'll have to explore, and a new chief will, is that there's a couple of firefighters who now have master's degrees in emergency management. We've never had anybody like that, right? So maybe we have to look at some of the resources that we have, and also some of the volunteers. I mean, some great people that Glenn's recruited on the CERT teams, and see, you know, who might be able to get more training and be, to give time. You know, it's rare to have someone who has all these skills and all the time, right? So the town's been really blessed. At the same time, you want to continue to build the bench, right? So that's something that has to happen. So, but again, thank you, everybody.
All right, Jack, I just saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've gotten some texts, and what they're asking is the questions that were raised about the application or the job description. That question that was brought up wasn't answered, nor was the question about the town bylaws, which clearly state that they are separate positions, and their selection process is dramatically different. And I also had spoken to an employment attorney earlier who said if you hire somebody on one set of job descriptions, which you're not authorized to offer, and that clearly the job description that is on the Massachusetts Municipal Association, which I quoted earlier, clearly is not an authorized job position. So I just think that legal thing to protect the interests of the town, you know, needs to be corrected. And so, and I've gotten a bunch of texts, so I assume that Chris, you'll get that taken care of.
Jack, are you talking about the job description for who?
For the fire chief. It says there's a double job description. It said the job that's being advertised says to serve as fire chief and emergency emergency management director. That's a direct quote. So that's what is being advertised. And that is the job description that the applicants have answered to. So you run into problems if, in fact, that's not the job that's offering. It run into additional problems in that Chris Senior is not authorized to put that out. So I just say that's a legal quagmire waiting to happen, and I just think we need to get that corrected. That's all.
I believe this is the correct job description that we need to use based on state requirements for a fire chief. We can double check with council on this, Chris.
Well, you can certainly do that, but I double checked, and that is not what you're looking for is a fire chief and as emergency management director.
Chris.
I just, you know, I think the conversation we've had tonight is pretty much covers it all. You know, I don't think efforts to muddle this and confuse this are really helpful. I think it's pretty clear what we're talking about and how Cohasset works. And I think several of you have already raised the point that A modern fire chief has to have emergency management experience and, quite frankly, has to be prepared to step in as well. I mean, there's been times when people are on vacation or out of town, and it's just natural that you hire someone with that level of experience. Now, again, there's an effort being made here to make something out of nothing. There's no controversy here. Okay, Glenn's the emergency management, or the to use the bylaw term, the emergency preparedness. And there's no plans to do anything other than maintain him in that role as long as he's willing and able to do it, and the board wants to keep him appointed. There's a lot of planning to do. That said, we're not looking backwards, we're looking forwards at the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we have to have people who are trained and ready to take on tasks. Doesn't mean they're going to be that person, right? You hire people in every single day of the year. But if you're hiring someone to be the fire chief, and again, you've heard Chief Sylvia say, the deputy emergency management director serving in that capacity for 15 plus years, you have to have someone who's ready to step in. That's the conversation I think we've had tonight, I think covers all of it. There's really no reason to go over it again.
No,
Yeah, but Chris, the problem with that is,
no, Jack, I think we're all in agreement about understanding the importance of scope of what Glenn has done, and Glenn giving us a job description, I think, can be more helpful as we're moving forward. But it feels like at least the majority of the board very much cares about this future fire chief person having that type of emergency management knowledge and experience for the safety of the town. Jack, you're muted.
yeah, I'd like to address the points that made. First of all, I was not addressing whether or not we should have some degree of familiarity with emergency management with a fire chief. I very specifically brought up, and I think that we really need to answer when specific questions are raised. The questions need to be answered. The job description specifically says emergency management director. Doesn't say experience. And what people should be aware of is that when you post a job like that, that you have some potential legal, issues down the line. So I'm just saying we need to correct that. I was not right, and nor did I say ever that emergency management familiarity was not part of the things we would do with. So I think it's not quite fair to put words in my mouth when I'm reading the actual words that was posted, and it is an inaccurate job description.
But
because we are not looking for an emergency management director, are we? Are we, Chris?
I think.
Are we looking for an emergency manager director? Yes or no?
Corey and Jean, I see both your hands up, but.
I was just going to recommend, I mean, if we have a legal question, obviously none of us are lawyers, or at least in this field, I think it's fine. We can refer this just to town council for review. And if, to get to Mr. Creighton's questions, if town council wants to address those that way, I think that'd be a good way. And we can, do that, going forward. But we really should probably keep on going with the other stuff we have, because I know we got a lot of people waiting here for other things. So thank you.
Yeah, we can check with this on council. Jean, did you have a point?
I was just going to echo what Corey said. I would also, in fairness to Jack, the Director of Civil Defense and Emergency Preparedness, which is what I think you're referring to, Jack, in our bylaws, is appointed by the select board. Glenn, I think that's what you are. I don't think we're proposing vis-a-vis this fire chief posting to do anything that affects that. And maybe that's a part of the disconnect that can be squared away right now. But we should check with council if there's confusion on that, because I do think that these are arguably separate positions, which wouldn't detract from you, Chief Sylvia, or you, Glenn, but I could be mistaken.
And again, I think if tonight's conversation reflects anything, it's that we are on the same page about this. So I don't think we have any further debate until we move farther along with the chief search. But we can check with council on the wording. All right. Thank you, Chief Sylvia and Glenn, for your feedback. That was really helpful. All right, moving on to our next agenda item, which I know we have a lot of people here to observe and watch about, our ball field leasing process. We want to discuss the timeline there and then the review and approval of the RFP. And Michelle, I'm going to let you talk in a minute, but just to tee this up, I want to thank everyone that has reached out to all of us in the past several months, especially the past couple of weeks. There are a lot of heightened emotions and feelings about this issue, and it's really nice to see people so engaged in this issue, but I know that there are a lot of strong feelings on all sides here. And the board is really trying to hear all of these sides and thoughts. And the reason we have this on the agenda tonight is to tee up this process now and the timeline for how this is going to play out. And I want to ensure everyone that there will be enough time for the board to not only do our due diligence on this, but also for all of you to be heard. Those of you who don't feel like you've been heard yet, I know we've gotten a lot of great calls and emails and discussions about this, but I believe we're thinking about having a separate meeting early in February just on this issue for people to come and speak on it. But I wanted to start with letting Michelle give a little more info about the RFP process and that review process that we want to put into motion tonight. Michelle, I know that not everyone viewing is familiar with what this even means or what this process is. I don't know if you could maybe summarize or maybe read off some of the language about what this even means and what the descriptions are, but just kind of provide an overview of what we're doing here so everyone is on the same page.
Sure. So we are requesting proposals from organizations, youth organizations, nonprofit organizations, to lease the Barnes Field. We put together an RFP that states there's many qualifications that would enable someone from the town of Cohasset, an organization from the town of Cohasset, to have an advantageous response to this bid. So as far as the timeline, I'll go over that in a minute, but there's things in this RFP that I think people will want to hear. And some of the qualifications are that the proposer must show that they've operated similar recreational facilities within the town. So that's something, and I know CYBSA is really the ones that are looking to lease this property. The lease is going to be for 10 years. That's outlined here in the RFP. Some things included in the RFP are proposals submitted by nonprofit organizations within the town of Cohasset, used specifically for youth athletics. Something that includes significant community inclusion. Proposals that include annual maintenance, address ADA compliance issues, and other upgrades to the field. And in-kind contributions to the town would be highly beneficial. All of these items are things that we've heard in the past that are almost trigger points for the use of these fields. So that's how this has been drafted. This is still in draft form. It's been sent to legal counsel to review. As soon as we have this back, I'll be able to distribute it amongst everybody who's requested it. And there are several requests for it. The description obviously is the Barnes Complex. It's located at 185 North Main Street. The timeline, it's a bit aggressive. In knowing that we'll likely only have 1 or 2 candidates that submit against this bid, I think it's doable. So I already advertised it in the Central Register. So that's already happening because you have to advertise it in advance. So I didn't want to wait for the legal counsel to give the green light to put the advertisement in, because you can always pull it back. But I wanted to at least start that process. It'll be available on January 11th, assuming that we get the green light from legal counsel. We do want to run this for a period of at least 2, maybe 3 weeks. We would like to schedule interviews with the candidates the first week in February. And the interviews will be a select committee. It'll be town staff. It could be members of the community, and we'll put that together in the next week or so. the evaluation period will end and we'll make a recommendation to the select board. At such time, you'll have the opportunity to review everything, see if you agree with our qualifications. And then you can issue a temporary lease, which is typically a notice of award. So the notice of award is the trigger point to say, you've been granted this lease. We're going to work out the lease details in the next 30, 60 days. But there's a lot of questions as if, if we send in a proposal and we want to start making modifications to the site, what is the trigger for us to do that? And the trigger point really is that award. If they're awarded, if they receive the notice of award, they can then start procuring things on their own and setting up contractors, because as you know, right now, the period for setting up contractors is excessive. So they need something in their hands to start beautifying this property. Part 2 of this is the lease. As soon as we award the best organization or candidates for this field, we'll have to go into the lease process. There's a draft lease attached to this RFP, still waiting for legal counsel to review a couple of the items to make sure it's not too excessive. We know it's going to be a youth organization that receives the award. So we obviously don't want to burden them with all kinds of legalese that isn't necessary. So we're going to look through this and make sure that it's fair to a youth organization. So if all goes according to plan, on the February 15th meeting, select board meeting, we're hoping to at least get approval for the notice of award. And then we'll start negotiating the lease. There's some lease terms in here that also give the select board the right to, how do I say this? The select board will have the right to negotiate additional items. So things that aren't put in the proposal or even are put in the proposal can be waived in there. And then the select board will have the right to negotiate other items. If they want to put a new scoreboard up, of course, the lights. These are items that can be negotiated in tandem with the lease or after the lease is executed. That's up to the select board. So.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And I know we're still playing with these February dates. I know we maybe had thought February 8th could be a separate meeting just about this, but we can figure out this timeline as you're going. And just from my perspective too, I want to hear from my fellow board members on how we do this research and due diligence individually and then as a board to be able to be prepared to vote on this and make decisions in February. And I really want to hear from all of you what you think we need or what you need to be able to feel like you've gathered enough information to be able to make decisions on this and to be able to take a vote on it. I know a lot of us have gotten a lot of information about this in the past, but moving forward, as we're kind of putting this timeline into motion, I think it's important that we as a board are doing all of the due diligence that we need. Let's see. Jean, I saw your hand, and then Diane.
Thanks, Carrie, and thanks, Michelle. That was helpful to understand. Just one quick question for Michelle. Michelle, insofar as I understand it, let's assume that there's a notice of award that goes out to a nonprofit within Cohasset, and at that point, then we can start to actually formalize the lease details, including negotiating back and forth, including things that were or were not in the draft lease that was presented, just to give us the flexibility to finalize. And is it fair to assume that after, let's say we come to a lease in mid-February for the sake of argument, could we then do a lease amendment after that point if we wanted to, because we have the authority to move forward?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I did just have a quick procedural question on that front. And
good
Carrie,
point.
to your question about the sort of the process, I realize that people have a lot of strong feelings on both sides of this, and I think it is wise for the board to figure out what's the information that we feel we need in order to make a decision, including on the lights
Yep.
along the timeline that we're talking about, which is about, it sounds like a month and a half as the RFP process is occurring. It sounds like it's pretty flexible in terms of not locking the board into one decision or set of conditions based on what Michelle was just saying about the lease. And so it sounds like during that interim time period, we should gather information that we feel like we need. And the question is, what's the best way to do that? From my perspective, I know that there are sort of three issues that people have at least been consistently raising in terms of the specifics about the lights with respect to glare and spill. And so I think it would be really helpful to get more specific, precise information, including about safety information, including from the manufacturer, safety metrics, and any sort of best practices there. I know that there's been also a call for independent lighting experts, including from organizations like Dark Sky. So I think we should inquire into that a bit more, including with assistance from the manufacturer, because I know this is a big, it's a competitor to Musco that's out there on the West Coast. It's not Musco. Like I said, it's one of their competitors, from what I understand. And so I think from my perspective, that's information that we could gather, and then people could independently review it, during that time period. Likewise, with respect to like the parking and safety concerns, I think that, we can consult with the police chief and figure out what we need to do on that front in terms of any concerns that he has from that angle, as well as suggestions he may have to enhance safety. And then I know there's an outstanding question about the field study, which, that's something that obviously we as the select board can follow up on in terms of, it may not be done by mid-February, probably still will be ongoing, but we might get some preliminary information that would be helpful to share on that point. And then my last question that I would have and want sort of fleshed out during this process too, is to, I know that there's an impetus to really sort of take our time here, which I think that this time period should allow us to build into, but I do wonder, this is a donation fundamentally that's being offered with respect to the baseball lights by a group of citizens. And oftentimes with donations, there's only so long that donation money will just linger out there. And so it's been lingering out there for quite a while, a year at least at this point. And so I'm wondering, is there any sort of timeline on the offer of the gift from their standpoint, which I think would be important to understand too. And so those are sort of the questions that immediately come to mind for me, but other people may have other questions.
Thank you, Jean. That was a great answer to what I was asking in terms of what all of us need as a board to be able to move forward and make decisions. Diane.
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to state is just in terms of the due diligence that we all need to do. I think it needs to be done as a board, because I think that in a lot of issues lately in town, including this one, each of us as individuals have been approached by other people. And I really think that we all need to get the same information at the same time and have discussions with each other about it, and the public, and it should be done in public, in a public forum. So I wonder, specifically because tonight's discussion is about the lease and the RFP
Yep.
for that, whether we should talk about specifics, knowing at least one of the likely respondents to this RFP and what they are going to be looking for. And it says right in here, proposals will get preference that include annual maintenance, address ADA compliance, and other upgrades to the location. Whether we need to be more specific and ask for some kind of a capital improvement plan with the specifics of what is being proposed, so that when we make a decision on the notice of award, we may not have all the details at that point about specifically lighting and the whatever, all the spill, et cetera, but at least we'll know what the proposal is for upgrades, capital upgrades to the facility. And I know Michelle probably wants to answer that before I keep going on, so I'll stop.
Yeah, Michelle, I see your hand up for that.
Sure. So Diane, that is included in here. We say that all the proposals shall include a plan for improvements to the fields and equipment on the premises. And then if you scroll down through the RFP further, on the proposal form, we do ask for a development of a capital plan for the 10-year period. So it's in here, we do ask for it, and it's a requirement. So.
And then to that, one piece of information that I would need specific to this conversation, or the likely respondent, would be what really is a gift. If they're going to pay for lights, for example, who does the procurement? How will all of that work for any kind of material upgrades to this town-owned land?
Michelle.
So I did have a conversation with CYBSA specifically, if they are the ones that are awarded this, and they will procure on their own and turn it over as a gift to the town, any large-scale improvements.
And is that something we could clarify, at least in the RFQ or RFP, that, my only thing is, we had a lot of these discussions in the past about gifts to the town, and just whether or not prevailing wage would get put into the equation, et cetera.
Sure.
And how that would all work.
All good points, Diane. Okay, Corey.
All right, so I got three things, and I'll
right.
try to my best to just give me a little space and I'll get through them.
Great.
So I think, obviously lots of emails, we've all been getting them. And as Carrie said, lots of opinions, but I think the one thing that's really kind of bridges everything is I want to really clarify at what point residents are going to have the ability to give input on these things. I think really leading this is the being, understanding, giving the residents the knowledge that, is it when we're only putting the RFQ out right now, and I'm not quite sure. I think we need to, in the RFP, have all these details. I think that could be in the lease, but at what points, is the public going to be able to talk about, see, and then give their input on the lease factors? Are we going to have, or when would we have, do we have to have a hearing before we, award the lease? I think that's really the thing that is common across all these, is people want to know when it's going to be their turn to give their input. So, that's the first thing. And then the other two things are for the lease, and just two things that I kind of flagged. I know that another common theme is safety concerns. I think those exist regardless of whatever field improvements, whoever. So I do think we should at least have in the back of our minds language about when a police detail is required, if there's going to be more than X number of people there. I think having a police officer, covering where people park, making sure people don't get hit in the street, I think would be just very nice. So that may be something I'd like to put in there. The other thing is, there was a small sentence about performance bonding. I do think that we need to beef that section up and be really clear that, whatever field improvements that occur, which is going to be on town land, is fully bonded, because we don't want to have exposure for anything that, was built by a private entity. And we just have a short sentence there. But when it comes to, insurance or liability or payment, and then what happens if there's the mechanism for what happens if something goes wrong if CYBSA finds another field or whatever, we need to understand for the town's protection, how that works. So that'd be my only kind of recommendation with council, is just to beef up the bonding section to be sure we're protected.
Okay, that's a good point. Michelle, I see you making a note of that. And Corey, to your point about when are people going to have the ability to speak on this, I do think we need a whole separate meeting just devoted to this subject, where we can invite everyone to come share their thoughts. But I also want to really reiterate to everyone watching tonight and everyone in town that those who have taken the time to call and email us and send us social media messages and reach out to us, we are reading and reflecting on those messages. A lot of you have been really thoughtful about your opinions. So, there's a lot of different ways I think to be sharing opinions. We will have another meeting where this can all happen. And looking at the calendar, I was thinking maybe it could be either the second or third week in February.
Could we
go ahead,
clarify,
Hope.
I think maybe instead of just putting a date on it, saying after we have the RFP, we will have a hearing before we, award the lease. If
Yeah.
we just say that publicly, and that's what we're planning on doing, I think that would make it a lot easier for people to understand, okay, this is the lease, and
Totally.
these are the terms as they're understood. They can review them, they can think about them, they can talk about them, and then we can invite people and we can have a structured conversation about what the actual terms are. I do worry if we have something before that point, we get a lot of opinions about stuff that maybe isn't even on the table.
Right.
So if we just say, yeah, we're not going to award the lease until we have a really good public conversation, I think that puts the line in the, puts a stake pretty clearly.
And again, I don't even know if the proper term would be hearing or just a public forum, right? Or just a meeting devoted to this where people are invited to speak. We can flesh that out. But I agree, we're really trying to do this properly with the timeline while also getting this RFP in process. Jack, I saw your hand up next. You're muted, Jack.
There we go. Yeah, one of the things that I think we're going to see in this process is kind of twofold. One is there's been over the years a variety of different concerns about traffic and kids crossing and all of that. And I think that the lease will serve to formalize the understanding and make it so the town and whoever ends up using it knows what the issues are and the proper behavior. And that is going to be no matter whether they're lights or not. So I think part of the thing we can all get together as a community is figure out how we make this particular piece of town land work for the benefit of the town. And it will be very helpful to get that decision done if we focus on that. And then we move to the contentious part, which is the lights. And whether the lights are there or not down the line, the first part we need to figure out. So I think that two-part. And the other thing is, I should make sure everybody who knows that when they send something to a town official on a town email, it becomes a public record. So you should be aware of that. There's no expectation of privacy. I'm a big believer, the more information, the better. And I do think we should have some, at least one open meeting where people can present in an organized manner. So we do have the information to make that decisions, both for the first, shall we say, the safety part of the decision-making tree, and then when we get into the contentious part about the lights.
Okay, thank you, Jack. And again, thinking about just timeline, Michelle, I don't know, because we have a lot of viewers tonight. I had originally thought we maybe could do something on February 8th. Our Tuesday night meeting. I don't know if that, Michelle, if you think that would be like a week too soon to maybe have this public forum or hearing or whatever we're calling it, but that's about the area of when I was thinking this could be a discussion.
It could be.
Okay,
It could be.
okay.
I just don't want to lock us into that.
No, I know. I know we're not ready to be locked in
specifically.
right now. Yeah. I want everyone watching to know though that we're going to decide when this will be and everyone will be informed about it. I don't know if we can decide it right this minute, but that's
Right.
about when it will be, maybe.
Maybe something that would be helpful to expedite the process a little bit for the public forum is once we receive legal's approval, we'll put everything up on the website. People have the ability to pull it down and they can feel free to send comments to me. I can gather them, send them off to the board. So then we can get ahead of it a little bit. And then as soon as we have the public meeting, then many of the questions will already be answered.
I think that's a great idea, Michelle. Diane and then Jack, and then we have a few comments from the audience.
I had one question earlier, just in terms of the interviews. Is that a requirement? And if you only had one respondent, would those still take place?
They don't need to be. It's not a requirement. It's a preference if you have additional respondents. but not
Okay, and then-
necessarily a requirement.
And then to just, if I understood Jack's point, which I agree with, which is that we're talking about, two things in a way. So I think just we have to see how the timeline works itself out. But the first one is the lease, which I think has to take place no matter what.
Yeah, we voted that it will take place.
Exactly, and the
Yes.
general concerns therein. And that's one conversation. And the second conversation is the expectation that there's going to be some capital improvements being proposed that are going to, that are somewhat controversial or contentious. So, whether that's, one meeting where we get the lease taken care of with input from the public, and then a follow-up with that's a little more engaged very specifically with the technical proposals that exist for the capital improvements. But anyway, I do think they're two separate issues, and I want to tackle the lease first.
Okay, no, it's a good point. And again, we did just vote at town meeting about this lease, and I don't think the lease itself is going to be controversial. I think it's these other parts that are controversial. Jack, do you have another point?
Yeah, I well spoken, Diane. Let's do the easy part first. Let's get that done. The other thing is, I'm just thinking outside the box on something like this. Does it make sense to consider a Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon forum? Is that more convenient for more people? I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just putting it out.
During ski season, Jack?
Well, I wasn't going to be there, and I know you won't be there, and then we don't have to answer all these questions. I don't know, but that's a good point, Diane.
And again, we're also back on Zoom for the time being, so that might help people's access.
Just throwing it out there.
So that's a good point, Jack. We can consider different times of the week. Jean? You're muted.
Sorry. I think that working through what is probably, for the most part, with most issues, likely to be a pretty boilerplate lease makes sense, in part because we want to make sure everything is confirmed as soon as possible on that point. And also recall that when we're doing a lease with CYBSA, we're sort of setting a bar too for those others in town using town property, and how we'll approach it and the process we'll use, right, on sort of the boilerplate lease issues, whether it's the American Legion or other groups that we know are using town property without a lease. And so I think, we should also think about that in terms of consistency of approach, as well as lease terms where applicable. I think, though, that there is a potential for, and I'm just going to suggest it, I'm not sure there's a reason why we can't sort of begin addressing the quote controversial issue on a similar track. Let's say we use the February 8th meeting to have a discussion about the lights. Let's do our due diligence in January. Let's intake all the information that we think we need, and have a discussion on that. So that way, we all as a select board can have in a public forum with public input and people understanding the information we're looking at, and make decisions to do that again on a dual track. I'm not sure why we can't do that. It doesn't seem, particularly if we're waiting for the lease to go through, we still have an open offer of a gift on the table. Even if we decide not to proceed with the lease, the town has an offer of a gift on the table for lights. And so I do think we are going to have to address the substantive issue. And I think that, we should just sort of pursue that and diligently and do the due diligence, including whatever we feel like we need to do on our own to get comfortable and get sufficient information to make that decision and move forward. I'm not sure why we need to hold that as we await the lease and RFP. And that doesn't mean that we still can't do the boilerplate lease or the standard lease first, and then next go to the more controversial issue. But again, just to try to move the process along.
Diane, then
And
Corey.
I'm not suggesting we slow anything down. It could conceivably be done at the same time and on
Yeah.
parallel tracks, but I don't want one thing to hold up another if
Totally.
if it looks like we have an opportunity to move forward with one thing or another. I also want to say, and this is to my earlier point about making sure that we all and the community have the information at the same time and the ability to talk about it, because we have never had a formal presentation of a gift of lights or a gift of money to get lights or anything. So there's never really been, I understand that, because I've had as many conversations as all of you about it, but, we haven't as a board looked at a proposal yet in writing. So that's something that we do need to do before we're able to get too far ahead in this conversation.
Which is why we're doing this tonight with this agenda item, because you're right, we don't have a proposal yet to even vote on, and that's why we're putting this into motion. Corey.
Yeah, I think there's some guidance or there's some benefit to getting the lease done first, in that it'll give some parameters about what can and cannot be done when it comes to who's that whole process, who RFQs, if it's a donation, all those. I think there's so many balls in the air getting the lease kind of hammered out. It doesn't mean we can't talk about some things beforehand, but getting the lease hammered out will give us some of the rails we need to kind of understand what structure anything in the future would take. So again, not trying to suggest we slow things down, but it may give us some of the clarity that we're looking for when it comes to how does this even work? Do we want to do it a gift, or if somebody leases it, can they just put it up themselves? If they put it up themselves, what are the procurement laws versus us taking it? If we take the money and it isn't enough, what happens? If we take the money and it's too much, what happens? There's all these questions, and I think there's so many of them, and they're so unclear. If we get through the lease process first, that gives us some understanding of what something in the future could look like. And I think that would bring a lot of clarity to the community about what the steps are going forward.
Okay, thank you, Corey. And again, this could all still be done at the same meeting. You know what I mean? Like, we could start with going over the lease and then hammering out these other things after that. Like, it doesn't even need to be 2 separate days. We're just trying to figure out how to best handle this. But again, we don't even have the proposal to vote on yet until we put this into motion tonight. Jean?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you, Diane, in terms of let's get the quote formal presentation, so to speak.
Yep.
Let's let the community have input. This may need to be more than one meeting as we sort of move through the lease process. But it strikes me that, issues like spill and glare aren't necessarily going to be, and Corey, I appreciate the points you're raising. I think some of the substantive issues, though, surrounding the lights aren't necessarily going to be affected by sort of the legal structure or framework. I agree that there could be questions and will be questions depending on the pathway, but in terms of the substance of the proposal and what Diane is raising in terms of making sure, and you too, Corey, in terms of making sure that people have ample opportunity for the input in a public forum. I would be a fan of, putting it on the agenda for February 8th to get that formal presentation as sort of the lease process and the advertising timelines, et cetera, sort of sit out there.
I know, Michelle, we're not totally locking anything in, but February 8th is a strong option as we're moving along with this. Diane and then Jack.
I don't know if, I don't want to derail this conversation at all, but whether anybody could comment, whether Michelle, Carrie, or Chris, on the pursuit of a lease over other agreements, which we talked about before we did the Warren article, because we could do a use agreement or a licensing agreement. Is there, I just want to understand what the wisdom is behind the lease. I'm not opposed to it at all. I just, I knew there were other triggers we could employ to have some kind of a use agreement, and why the lease is, or if we do this RFP and get to a point of lease, maybe that's where we have the conversation. Is this the right structural agreement to have with the respondent?
Chris, if you want to come on and comment, and I know we did discuss this with council too. And this was, I believe, what was recommended by our council. Chris?
Okay.
Yeah, so a permit is a single use kind of thing, or, you know, Friday nights or Saturdays or whatever. That's what's done for fields with rec often. A license is what the board does now, right? You license events or activities for usually a year period. They're revocable. Licenses are revocable. And they are for a fixed period of time. A lease gives somebody, dominion and control over something with terms, and allows them to make, more permanent or more substantive improvements, have more sense of certainty, I guess, right? So if you give someone, it's like, you're leasing an apartment. You're not licensing an apartment for a month. You could be just, month to month. So those are the different. It's really a length of time and certainty of accessibility. Does that answer your question, Diane?
Good answer. Thank you. I just wanted to
Perfect
clarify
answer.
that for myself and others. Thanks.
Jack and then Jean.
Yeah, I was just going to say a little ray of sunshine in all of this. I suspect that the first part of this, there'll be pretty quick agreement, because everybody kind of knows what the issues are. And that I think we can move very quickly on. The other part is going to be contentious. We know that. And I think we all have to remember that this is a wonderful town. And I know both people on both sides are listening. It's a wonderful town. We're lucky to live here. Let's remember that we are lucky and that we are neighbors. And for the ball people, remember that the neighbors have legitimate concerns, and the neighbors to remember that, the kids do need a place to play, whether we decide that this is the spot or whatever. But let's remember, we're all citizens of a wonderful town.
Jean?
So I just wanted to clarify one point, including for the public. The select board did receive a proposal in August relating to the proposed donation and the lights. The residents, the neighbors were copied on that as well. This was a proposal that was also reviewed and discussed during the working group forum that Selectman Creighton and I sat at, I believe in November. That was pretty well attended by the neighbors and a lot of members of CYBSA. So there has been back and forth between sort of the primary stakeholders on each side. And so I don't want to sort of diminish all of that, communication that's been going on, because there has been communication, including to the board and among CYBSA and the neighbors. What there hasn't been is it in a formal board meeting setting, which is what I'm suggesting. And I think, Diane, you are too.
Yes.
Yep.
That's where I was going. I mean, unless we have it as a posted agenda item, it's kind of like a tree falling in the forest. And,
Right.
and we haven't really had a formal agenda item to even debrief on the November meeting. So yes, so I just want to make sure, that's one reason I just want to make sure that we all get the same information. We talk about it together, and we're not, having smaller groups, because it's something we all have to make a decision on, and it's important to the entire community, clearly.
Yeah, we're all in agreement on this. Jack, do you have another point?
No, actually, the only thing is I just get a text, somebody's trying to send a question in and they want it read. And I don't know whether they sent
So
it to you.
I'm getting to the questions from the audience
okay.
as soon as we're done with board members.
Okay, well, that's good. So I'll tell them to be ready at 1 a.m.
Is the board done discussing this? And Michelle, I feel like we are all on the same page here. And again, we've gotten a few questions from the audience that I think are going to be more substantively discussed at these future forums. But let's see. Darren Souza from 70 Black Rock Road says, thanks for the discussion. In terms of safety, CYBSA has consulted with Cohasset Police, and we will be sure to provide safety egress information about the facility, the parking lot, etc. It is our opinion that any safety discussion should include our public safety leadership. Absolutely agree with that. And I know that Chief Quigley has been involved in this already. Paul Kearse has asked about if we can have a public forum on this. And yes, we were discussing that. Absolutely. And then Matt Rudnick from 170 North Main Street wants to know why we can't wait until the field study is finished. The optics seem rushed. Why can't this gift wait? He believes that the order of events should be field study, determining the lease, and then figuring out multi-use fields and how the gift could potentially help all of Cohasset, not just CYBSA. And I think that these are interesting points that we can discuss further at future forums, but I don't think it's appropriate to debate those particular issues tonight. All right, Michelle, any final thoughts from you on moving forward?
No, I truly believe the best thing to do is to post the draft lease on the website and have people comment in advance.
Okay.
So you can at least get that boilerplate down. And during, if you want to have that meeting on the 8th, maybe that's a piece of business. You can just approve the lease in its form. And then depending on who submits proposals, that lease is already drafted, it's approved, and you're just slotting in a name at that point.
Okay.
Michelle, you need from us a motion to open or close the art. Which one is it?
So
You
neither.
don't need either from us?
No,
Okay, just making
not right now. But I just think that would be the best thing to do, to get all that information in advance, get that boilerplate lease drafted, reviewed by the select board, and then you can be ready to approve on that date.
I agree.
I guess that's your question, Corey. So on that February 8th date.
And we can give an update on this at our next meeting on the 18th. We're having a meeting just about communication stuff on this next week on the 11th, but the 18th is our next normal select board meeting. So we can give a quick update on this, but I agree with you, Michelle. I think that's the smartest way to go about this timeline.
I'd also like to add by the 18th meeting, not to add another layer onto it, but we should have concrete dates about the field study as to when it will be completed. So that was a question, and I think we'll be able to answer that better.
Wonderful. So Matt Rudnick, if you're listening, we should have more info by the 18th. Okay. Are we all set with this topic? Great. Okay, moving on to an issue that we started talking about at our last meeting before the holidays about funding plans for Elm Street and zoning and discussing Chapter 90 stuff and all of that. I know that we weren't able to finish this. There's clearly a lot of thoughts on this. This is a lot of money we're talking about. And I especially wanted to invite or promote Ralph Dormitzer into the room because I know you tried to talk at our meeting last time, Ralph, and we had some technical difficulties. So Chris, I'll let you get this started and I'm going to let Ralph come in as well.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Based on all the comments that were received during and after the last select board meeting, it seems appropriate the planning staff to circle back with a working group to refine the scope and scale of the project so that it's clear that if there's going to be applications for grants, that some kind of plan needs to be together. At the same time, exactly what that plan should include just needs to be taken a little harder look at. And that's what's happening now. Unfortunately, between the last meeting and this, so we had the holidays, some people are out with COVID, so it wasn't a great time to make a lot of progress. That said, I met with Lauren today. She's reaching out to the working group and the consultants. I think over the next couple of weeks there'll likely be a public working group meeting, and they will just take a look at this and just kind of take some sharpened pencils to the scope and scale of this. It's clear that a project that's $5 million, again, considering how much of this has been stripped out in the public comment period already, may not need to be that big, and it's getting something more modest. That still, this corridor is being studied, and it was identified in the master plan because it links the harbor to the village. So it's an important corridor. It needs to look nice. I don't think anyone debates any of that. It's exactly what's going to be included. And how much planning has to be done for it. There's going to still need to be a lot more public input for design and design features. That said, it may not have to be quite as elaborate as it was before. So that work's going to go on over the next couple of weeks. And the hope is to maybe by February 1st have something a little more concrete to come back to all of you and say, hey, here's a little more rescaled plan. Here's the potential funding sources. And I've also been asked to take a look at funding sources, capital budgets. Brian Host and I exchanged emails today, just to to say, are there any other sources besides Chapter 90? Because the town has a perpetual need for road work. And Chapter 90 can be spent on anything related to roads and highways, sidewalks, planning, all of that. We've historically spent most of it on, and equipment, we've historically spent most of it on road repaving rather than pure design. So it's something we'll look at and try to, we want to make the best use of the available resources.
Yeah. And I know the board wasn't ready to vote in favor of this last meeting, but I think we will be once we have a little more clarity on what these funding sources are, Chris, and what just the broader perspective is here on future funding sources, how much we need to use. Are there more grants available? I think a little sharpening, like you said, is exactly what we need. Jean, I see your hand up, but Tracy or Chris, I'm trying to promote Ralph in here and it won't let me. Can one of you promote Ralph to be a panelist? And Jean, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think unless the price comes down significantly, I wouldn't say that I'm ready to vote for it, or maybe I am and the vote might not be positive. But one thing that I did want to sort of raise to everyone's attention is that I had a great conversation with the chair of the Hingham Harbor Committee just to better educate myself, and I'm connecting him with Tim Davis, who I think is in the audience. And, I think we can learn a lot of lessons from Hingham, who is really sort of struggling to think through resiliency at their seawalls too, which when I think about Elm Street and, a huge point of what we really want to be concerned about and thinking about, again, goes back to coastal resiliency. And there's some interesting information out there. Hingham just went through a huge grant process with the state, and I think has some lessons learned that we should consider. And so if we're sort of going back to the drawing board and sharpening pencils, I just wanted to alert you, Chris, to that, and I'll send you that information. But like, for example, one of the things that I learned that I didn't know about, which would really make sense in the Elm Street corridor, although it might not look pretty, are removable walls to block the velocity of waves if they're, for example, coming at our sewer plant. There's interesting, techniques out there that you can do to address flooding and other, coastal concerns as we grapple with climate change. So I know it's a little bit off topic and I'm not going to go too far down there, but again, you said sharpen pencils and I thought, okay, well, maybe it's the right time to really sort of merge that concept with Elm Street.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Diane, and then Corey, and then Ralph.
I'm just gonna defer too many comments other than to say that having worked on the Elm Street Corridor Working Group, I look forward to going back to revisit some of these issues, but I drove down Elm Street the other day and really took a look and thought, we got to do something. There's a reason why it was a priority in the master plan, and sidewalks with telephone poles in the middle of it. And so anyway, I look forward to the further conversations about this really important thoroughfare, if you will, in town.
Okay, Corey.
Struggling a little bit with how to phrase this, but it's if we want to have a discussion about the substantive reasons about why the design is the way it is, then we shouldn't have launched a working group to do all this work. The working group did all this work. They've been talking about it for 12, 18 months. They've had a lot of public discussions. I've seen flyers around town. I'm kind of unclear if we're going to sit down and kind of say, well, what about this? What about this? Then I kind of feel like we're throwing out a bunch of work, and we're probably going to make a worse decision because we haven't thought of all the things that they're doing. And so why even bother having a working group if this is the case? And if we want to have a substantive discussion about what is in the working group, then we should invite the working group to be here. That way we can talk about it. Right now, if we just sit here, give opinions, and we don't actually have anyone to answer, well, we actually talked about this. I mean, last time, there were some concerns that were brought up, and there were points saying, hey, yeah, we thought about that. So if we want to have that discussion, we should, but we shouldn't be just opinionating into a vacuum without having either Elm Street Working Group here. But we also should understand that a lot of these questions were answered. If we have questions, if the public has questions, they can go to the working group, and that's why we have a working group. to sit here and kind of Monday morning quarterback everything, just it's not really efficient, and I don't think it's a good service to the town.
Diane, do you have a follow-up on that? Or you put, I couldn't tell.
Corey said what I was going to say and didn't say, but I agree with him. And I think Lauren, expressed that the Elm Street Corridor Working Group's going to get back to work real soon. And, there's a reason many of these decisions were made. There was lots of public forums, and, if we can tweak some things and look really critically at the cost, that we will absolutely do.
I mean, I was under the impression that the funding sources was the main area of concern that we wanted to keep discussing, not necessarily all the other plans and progress that the working group has made on things like design and style and aesthetic and that type of stuff. Like I was thinking this conversation was going to focus mostly on funding sources, but if it's going to focus on more than that, I agree, though obviously the people that are experts on this need to be included.
Well, it was the funding to get us to a certain level of design work where some of these things that we haven't quite figured out or that we had new information on or whatever would start to work itself out. But that's the point. We need to get there.
And speaking of experts, Ralph, you have been waiting for 3 weeks to talk about this. Thank you for your patience. I know you know a lot about this issue and you've put a lot of work and time into it. So would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Kerry, and for responding. I appreciate that a lot. I really do. I am really speaking for myself and not the Capital Budget Committee, although I'm perfectly happy to talk about budgeting on this one as well. However, I may disagree, and I do it with respect to what people have done in the working group, but I strongly disagree with a lot of what has happened already. And I'll tell you why. I won't spend a great deal of time on it, but I will be at least fairly concise about my thinking. I think the project has conflated two things. It's conflated the redesign of Elm Street, which has been on the docket for the town since 1988, a very long time. And it's always been about really two things. It was about the fact that the street was widened in 1973, properties were taken, elms were cut down. And from that point forward, almost without exception, restoring the beauty of that street has been the objective. It has not been anything else. It has been that. What has happened, and I believe correctly in the process by which we came to where we've now come to, was the creation of a priority list that perhaps you do know. And I'm going to read the priority list that the working group, or at least the consultants, actually created through their processes. It said wider sidewalks. Actually, what's been written is wider streets. They meant wider sidewalks, street trees, landscaping and beautification, enhanced pedestrian street crossings, bike lanes, traffic calming, pedestrian scale lighting, and wayfinding signage. What I have found by looking at all of this, and I've been in a lot of projects, as you probably know, and often am a naysayer about many things, but in this case, I am in total agreement about the priority list. I think the priority list is correct, and it maps to everything everyone has said since 1972. However, what in fact has occurred as a result of the work of the working group and the consultants is not anything like street trees or beautification. It's really traffic calming. So what we have achieved out of this is a traffic calming solution. No trees, no beauty. So all that years, decades of thinking about this is being thrown out in order to satisfy an objective, which is number 6 on the priority list. I can't imagine how this has happened. So I'm being very direct to you in saying that this is not correct, and we need to reconsider what we actually are doing here. And we should separate out Elm Street, which needs to get done, it desperately needs to get done, it's been desperate for years, from the actual Cove redesign, and perhaps other things associated with the environment and what might happen with respect to sea level rise or other things. You've got to separate those out, because if you don't separate them out, getting Elm Street done is going to be conflated with too many other objectives, which will make it very difficult to do. I also want to talk a little bit about what about the cost. And I'm going to maybe surprise you with this, but I'm going to tell you what it really should cost, because we have good evidence of what, in fact, these kinds of projects cost. The project which redid all of the common streets, sidewalks, landscaping, and repaving was $300,000. We have a quote from T.E. Edwards from 3 years ago, to grind and repave and redo Elm Street, $114,000. This is a genuine quote. It may not be dated, it may not be today's numbers, but it's probably close. It is hard to believe we would spend $500,000 to $600,000 on a consultant and $4.5 to $5.5 million when Elm Street could be done for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. That's the reality of this thing. I also would like to point out that the Chapter 90 money, which can be used, I think, technically under the state guidelines for things like consultants, ought to be used to take a look, or to be used specifically to repave many of the roads in town which are a disgrace. If you walk around, drive around, we should be embarrassed by the condition of our roads. To take $600,000 and to move it over to consultants instead of actually repaving our roads is a disgrace, simply and straightforwardly. We should be embarrassed about even thinking about that.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt,
Oh,
Carrie?
go ahead, Diane.
I just want to somewhat call a point of order. I know this is listed on our agenda, but we were notified earlier this afternoon that we were not going to have a substantive comments on this. So I feel I'm prepared. I also feel like, our master plan implementation committee and our planning director, who's taken the lead on this, should be part of this discussion. As much as I value Ralph's input, I just feel like I'm completely
No, that's
unprepared.
valid.
We were told this was not going to be discussed.
We weren't planning on taking a
substantively.
vote on this tonight, but
Yeah, and
Corey, go ahead.
I want to hear from everybody, but then we should kind of line people up and kind of say, hey, you get a few minutes, and because there's a butters. I mean, Gene referenced concerns about residents. So if we're going to have a public hearing, but this kind of goes back to what I said earlier, which is we have a working group and they have had hearings, and if we think we need people to get listened to, we should really do that, because that's really the appropriate way to handle it.
no, I know we're trying to listen to everyone. I agree with everyone. And Ralph, we're trying to listen to you too, because I know you tried to talk at our last meeting, but I do think Diane has a point in terms of how substantive your comments are getting. They didn't need to be as long as they are tonight. I appreciate them, but I guess, do you have a final couple sentences to say on
I
this?
think it is very dangerous at this stage to
Okay.
ignore what I'm saying. And if you do, like all these other projects where we take them to a point where we have spent money and we actually fail, we're getting there if you don't pay attention. And I'm telling you, simply my experience in multiple projects in this town, where in fact the will of the town is not being observed. I don't care what you think about the working group. It's the will of the town we're talking about.
Okay.
So I have many other things I could say, and I do think you should have listened. And I oppose the idea of shutting people down, particularly where I've been trying to do this for 3 weeks. I don't like that one bit, and you should be aware of my thinking of that. So,
Ralph,
and you should be embarrassed about the rest of it. So,
okay. Well, Ralph, we really appreciate your expertise and thoughts, which is why we let you talk tonight, even though it's not planned to be voted on tonight. So thank you for your thoughts. I'm sorry if you feel like you were shut down. I think your thoughts were helpful, and I hope you can attend our next meeting where we continue to talk about this as well.
thanks, Gary.
Jean, I saw your hand next, and then Jack.
It sounds to me like we need to, and maybe Corey, this is what you're saying, we just need to have another substantive discussion that invites everyone into the public forum. My concern was we're going to race ahead with this Chapter 90 money, and that's sort of putting the cart before the horse in terms of, and Corey, you may disagree, but I do think that there's additional vetting to let other people.
You got to go back a little bit. I mean, master plan started out with this, and you knew the board, but you were on advisory before. I mean, there were, a lot of public meetings, a lot of public input. There were surveys, there were questions, there were discussions. Like, there's a lot of data here of people, who have given input. And I just, we're taking, there were people that have given us input, and we're kind of saying, well, we're going to ignore that, and we're going to, start from scratch. And that's really unfair to the people that gave their input for the last, 18 months. We have survey data. We've done public listening forums. There is information on this. You can read it. That's valuable. So we can't ignore that.
Well, and I don't think we're starting from scratch. I think we're just trying to gather all the information we need to make the best decisions on this. If I hate to be adding more meetings to all of our calendars, but if we do feel it's appropriate to have a meeting just on this issue too, we can do that as well. I think, that is an option. Jean, did you have a follow-up or?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, well, I appreciate that. And I've participated in those surveys and talked to people who live there and followed the working group and read, including the traffic study plan that CHP did for the planning board when we're talking about traffic calming and what the data showed, to educate myself on all of this. I think at the end of the day, it's fair to ask questions, including with price tags that are so big. I think if we put price tags on these priorities, that really, it's our obligation to think about whether we're meeting the priorities that the town envisioned, that was the intent, and whether the price tag matches what we should be doing in terms of what was envisioned when these were made into priorities. And so I'm not sure I view those as unfair. And Ralph, I appreciate your comments. They are helpful to understand the history, including the intent of what was meant behind when people were voting on these priorities in the master plan and what they expected.
Jack?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ralph. And my apologies on behalf of the board. Things are tough, decisions are tough, facts are tough, questions are tough. I just spent a lot of time on the zoning bylaw committee. Many intense hours with some very smart people. We came up with some ideas. Town meeting asked a lot of questions. A lot of the work that we did, back to the drawing board. All right, so what? That is how public process works. When people speak up, they don't need to be shut down. They don't need to be told, well, you can't speak anymore. I mean, I don't think that. And Ralph, I thank you very much for all the work that you did. And I think when people raise some questions, if they're legitimate, we need to answer them. We need to be responsive. Government is all about transparency. Government is all about advancing and opening the opinions of the common citizens. And if they don't appear at every single board and commission hearing, that doesn't mean their right to speak should be shut down. So Ralph, thank you very much. And thank you for all the work that you've done.
So Jack, are you saying that you think we need a separate forum on this? I'm not entirely sure.
I just said what I had to say. And I think that we need, as a town, to be a little more open to discussions and a little bit less prone to having bureaucratic ways of pre-made decisions have doors shut upon citizen input. That's all I really want to say about it, right now.
Okay. I mean, I think if this overall meeting tonight has reflected anything, it's that all of us care very much about citizen input. And we care very much about what the volunteers and board members in this town have done for years on these issues. So we all agree on that. And all of us are trying our best to make sure we have enough information as possible on all of these issues to take these hard votes and make the best decisions for the town. Diane?
I'm not quite sure that that's always been in the case on many issues And I don't think it's a time, but I can go through freedom of
Yeah,
information.
no, we don't need to
haven't been
discuss
at-
that now. It's
Lots
not
of
relevant,
things. So,
Jack.
and here we go, I get shut down. No more said. Thank you, Ralph.
Diane,
I'm good.
okay. Chris, do you have any final thoughts on this? We will continue this issue. Clearly, there's a lot more that needs to be said about it.
So just to circle back, and I mentioned this to Ralph when he and I exchanged emails earlier, there'll be more public process coming up just about even the scope. Clearly, there's some issues that have been raised, and as Ralph has pointed out, this is a conversation 50 years coming. So
Yeah.
it's good the town's having the conversation. None of these, no decisions on something like this are ever easy. And I do think that that the ongoing conversations will help clarify this. So Ralph, there'll be another meeting of the working group coming up. There'll be public input. And again, I think when Lauren and I met today was to help kind of hone this down a little bit. The price tag was a little high. The scope has changed. I mean, a lot of input have been given. And for example, the bike lanes, nobody liked them apparently, so they're coming out. So the beautification really seems to be the central part of this at this point. And what does that really cost? How much there's design work that needs to be done? And if the road's going to be made prettier, curbing and sidewalks unfortunately cost more than paving does. The cheapest part of this is actually the asphalt paving. So, and the question is, how much does the town, well, it's not so much how the point of this design process is also, how can we position ourselves for really good grant funding? There's a lot of money flowing through for beautification and resiliency and, what will a design get us to the community in a really good place to seek grant money? So that's the goal. So again, they'll be circling back. I think there's been a lot of great conversation tonight. There'll be more. And when something comes back to this board, I think it'll be in a better place. So thank you. I'm good.
Thank you, Chris.
And on the other piece of it, zoning, I think, we already just discussed it last time. The zoning study is moving forward. We're going to find another 50 grand, whether it comes out of consulting or another line that we have money for, we'll put that into the pot. So there'll be the 75 that special town meeting approved zoning analysis, 50 the state's giving us that's going to be more of a focus on the village zoning, and another 50 that we'll put into the pot for the bigger, broader zoning question. So that'll give, I think, enough money to move that forward. The one point that was raised to me that unfortunately I forgot to raise with you, carried upon the agenda, was the board needs to select someone to serve on the RFP review committee or the RFQ review committee. So think about that and put it on the agenda for next week, just to formally have a volunteer to do that work. Because every board has been asked to send one member to that, zoning the consultant RFQ review. You just have to make that call. I mean, I don't, you might be able to sneak it underneath here, but if you really want to, put it on the agenda for next week formally, then you can have whatever volunteer wants to serve.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's appropriate to vote on that tonight. So I think we need to put it on the agenda for next week. Okay, any final questions about zoning before we move on to sewer? Okay, speaking of another very complex, tangled, complicated issue, let's talk about the sewer intermunicipal agreement to discuss and talk about those frameworks and the progress on that. Corey, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Could I get sharing screen authority? I can. Thank you very much. Let me just pull up the PowerPoint.
Brian, I think you're coming in as well.
I'm sorry.
I think Brian Joyce is just joining us as well.
Yeah, no, I just asked Brian to join us because, when there's zeros and there's gallons per day, that's just not my brain. So, if there's technical questions, I'll certainly ask Brian to step in because he certainly knows the technicality here. 1 second. Oh, you gotta do the security thing. Okay, so actually, does somebody in the office have the report? Because I have to log in and log out and log back in. Tracy or Justine, do you have it? It's also in the packet. Carrie, you could open it up. I just can't share a screen.
Yeah, but I can, what do you need me to put it up, Corey?
Yeah, it's asking me to approve
My
permissions
screen
because I did a
sharing
Zoom
isn't working
update
either.
because
Okay, yep.
nothing's
I'll
easy
do it.
anymore.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And we have some sewer commission members, Paul Kearse and Bill McGowan on here. I want to clarify to all of you, we're not taking a vote on a regional plan or anything like that tonight. This is a discussion on ways to move forward.
So I do, Bill McGowan, I do
Yep.
want to, I'll go through this, and then there are some questions that I do want to address those. I was on the sewer commission meeting this morning where they had some questions, but I just wanted to invite them today.
Yep.
If to
And I'm
be here,
trying to
'cause
get
again,
you guys promoted, but
Oh, I was just putting it up first.
that's fine. Don't promote them though, because they can't be here as attendees because of open meeting law. So if they want to view it, that's fine. And we can, if you want to do the chair, but if we do more than one of them, it gets kind of legally questionable.
okay.
So anyway, so this is just the regional sewer update and next steps. So next slide, please. So, really the biggest issue we have in our town, and the reason why we're talking with Situate, as I understand it, really comes down to pollution in the Gulf River. Last summer, we actually had to close Bassings Beach. We had to close the harbor from swimming because of bacteria. And I got a quote here from Quinn Kelly, the Wicked Local, that the bacteria indicated the presence of fecal matter in the water. So you see the foam that develops as the Gulf drains into our harbor. That's all basically pollution. That stuff comes from failing septic systems or old septic systems that are among properties that border the Gulf River, and the Gulf River drains into the harbor. So this is something that's been a problem for decades, and it's hitting a breaking point right now where it affected our residents. I got a lot of emails from residents about why is this happening? What are we doing about it? And this is what we can do. Unfortunately, if you go to the next slide, please, this isn't something we can save. We can address on our own. You see the Gulf River here. It is Border Street and Gannett Road are all in Situate. South Main Street is in Cohasset. So if we want to clean up our harbor, then we need Situate to kind of be on board as well. Situate, I can't speak for, Situate may or may not have plans to do this, but again, this is a priority because it affects our health here in our town. So that's really one of the reasons why, last year and this year, I was the liaison to the board along with Bill McGowan from the Sewer Commission to kind of have a discussion. So next slide, please. The other thing that's on the radar here is that in 2007, those of you that were here, we were forced by the court to sewer Little Harbor. And that was because of pollution in Little Harbor. It was the same problem in a different different water. Yeah. And there were a lot of problems with that because basically if we're forced to do something, the decision matrix is out of our hands. And a lot of people, a lot of money that was spent and maybe could have been spent differently if we had been proactive rather than reactive. So we don't want to repeat this. We don't want the federal government or Mass DEP to come in and force us to do anything, especially right now where if we can partner, we may be able to have a better outcome. Next slide, please. Other things to be aware of. We have an IMA, an intermunicipal agreement with Hull that expires in 2026. So we do have some time here. Right now, it allows us to send 125,000 gallons per day to Hull. Hull just charges the retail rate. This was very important to us last year when there was a membrane failure at the sewer plant, and the sewer plant could only be run at half capacity. We basically had to ship all of our sewer to Hull, and this IMA made that possible. The town is also growing, and we are approaching an 80% limit of our current sewer capacity. When that happens, we're required by law to do a plan and submit to the state about what we're going to do about anything above that. We don't really want to run the plant at 80%. That's unhealthy for the membranes. That's just not what the plant's really designed for, as I understand it. So we want to stay below that 80% because we don't want to be forced to do something. Don't want to be forced to build another plant somewhere. We don't want to be forced to pay fines. We want to be ahead of this. And then what I just said earlier, Situate can help us out, but we can help them out. North Situate used to be a beautiful, vibrant area. It's suffering because of its lack of sewer access. If we were able to bring sewer to North Situate through some sort of agreement, it really would help, improve that area. places that I used to go to are gone, and it'd be nice to see that the whole South Shore, we're one community, and seeing, economic success in our downtown areas really benefits all of our towns. Next slide, please. All right, so just to catch you up on what happened, the last meeting that we had we had a meeting in mid-2020 with Cohasset. It was myself, the sewer commissioner, the sewer board chair, Bill McGowan, along with the Situate town manager, the chair of the select board at the time. We also brought Brian Joyce from DPW, Situate DPW there. And we had a meeting in Situate last year. We outlined priorities. And Bill McGowan basically highlighted on the board, hey, these are the streets that matter to us because it's going to clean up our harbor. And we kind of cut out other places that really didn't impact us. And we kind of jotted down, okay, how can we make this work? And the engineering team did some numbers. And we, as I said earlier, identified Border Street, Gannett Road, North Situate. They did some back of the napkin flow calculations and a little bit of preliminary infrastructure discussions about, is it possible with what we right now to take some of the North Situate sewer flow and use our existing agreement with Hull to send some north. And basically, so our plan is either neutral or covered. We kind of unpack that. And that was just kind of the beginning of what a framework would look like. No agreements made, but just basically, hey, this could make sense. Let's talk about it more. Next slide, please. So that's the vision, which I just alluded to, is basically connect Cohasset priority areas, those roads that I mentioned, through to Cohasset sewer system through South Main Street. Have the opportunity to reduce the load of our Cohasset treatment plant. Also, not adding Situate. We can't add Situate load to us. We don't have enough capacity for that. That'd be a bad decision. So if we do take on Situate load, we'd have to offset that by diverting flow to Hull. We'd also want to be looking for the IMA with Hull to allow us to have that safety valve to go on in case we have another plant issue. We also want to keep the plant in sustainable, healthy flow. We want to stay below that 8% trigger. So if we can work out something with Hull, it allows us to meet those three guidelines. There are alternatives to ways to do that, but this is an option which may work. And having Cohasset and Situate working together gives us a really good way to talk with Hull, because now it's we have a partner in the negotiations. And again, if we can bring to Hull a agreement that has a higher flow, even that's enticing for them to really make it worth our while as well. So it's an opportunity for cooperation. Next slide, please. So what the next steps would be if we want to do this is basically the board would be looking for a vote from the board just to say, yeah, this sort of makes sense right now, and we want to continue the discussions. We're not agreeing to there are no numbers on the table. There's no legal agreements on the table. We're not agreeing to anything except that, yeah, we want to keep talking. And I think it's important that we check in and say, yeah, does this make still sense? We should also just either appoint a liaison to these discussions as we have in the past. I've served at that. I'm happy to serve it again. If somebody else wants to take the mantle, happy to give it up too. The sewer commission will do the same, appoint a liaison. That way the sewer commission, obviously this is this really is their responsibility, and they need to be the ones, in the front seat with us. And then if we can do that, we would engage with Situate and Hull pretty much immediately, engage with the town managers, engage with their liaisons. And I'd be looking, or whoever is the liaison would be looking to go back to the board in 45 days. So I don't want to go to the next slide. Can you stop sharing? I want to address other stuff because the next slide is kind of a draft of what it could be. I do have a few Q&As about this, and I do want to address it because I know we're looking at them. If the chair is okay with that.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely okay with that. And I'm also
Okay, so
with allowing, sorry, Corey, I'm okay with allowing Bill to come in, but I do agree with you that having Bill and Paul in here, regardless of whether we're calling it public comment, it still seems like it's deliberating in terms of
okay.
open meeting law.
So I do, Bill asked in comments, he says, why was there a vote and only superficial council? Why are we invited? The board is not participating on regional plan, and there's questions. So, and I do want to, I think it's important that we're very clear about what's going on here. I have been talking with Bill. Bill joined me on a Zoom call with the town manager and Brian Joyce before the end of the holiday. And it was a check-in call to say, all right, is this framework, is what we discussed in Situate still on your mind? Bill told me, yes, it was. And we agreed at that meeting to discuss it at this meeting. I agreed to bring it to the select board, what we had talked about, which is in my presentation, what I talked with Bill and Brian and Chris about. I agreed to bring it to the select board today with his okay. And he would do the same with sewer. I don't think that happened this morning. So I'm not sure the sewer commission can talk about this yet, because I don't think they had time for it on the agenda. But Bill has been as chair, he's been at every meeting I've been in when this has been the primary topic of conversation. And I think that's important that we continue that. We can't do this on our own. So I did want to just clarify that in case anyone has questions about, how things have been involved. And if you want to, Madam Chair, if you want to promote Bill to hear from him first before we get into the thing, I'm happy to do
Tracy or Chris, we're having problems with who gets to promote tonight. I don't have that ability. So Chris or Tracy, could you please promote Bill? I tried to and it wouldn't let me. Bill, you should be a panelist now. There you are.
There I am. Sorry, guys, I haven't been to wardrobing, so.
That's okay.
I got to tell you that I am very upset, and I think the board is with the way this has gone on. We did not know any of the, we did not know that there was going to be a presentation on this tonight. We were invited on this or to this meeting at about 11:10 this morning. And I understand the whole aspect of collaboration and what have you. We've been working on this for 7 years. And now all of a sudden we're sort of like pushed to the side. And maybe the select board has appointed Corey to be the point person. I don't know that. If that has happened, then I'm wrong.
I mean, he is our liaison. So yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry, Bill. This was not at all an intent to leave you out. It was just to have Corey, who's the liaison, who's been attending your meetings, to give us an update on this issue, because we know that it is there's a lot going on with it. So this was not at all an attempt to exclude you. It was to let our board get briefed on it and get an update on it, because we haven't discussed it in a while.
I understand, but it appears so. And we just got the presentation 5 minutes ago. Why wasn't it sent to us like several days ago? Why wasn't it told, Bill, prepare yourself for a meeting with the select board tonight? None of that happened.
Bill,
I'm a
It wasn't a joint meeting. It wasn't supposed to be a joint meeting.
I understand. No. I understand that.
Bill, my apologies. The thing that I did this morning was I tried to be a courtesy to just say, as you and I talked about before the holidays, that I'd bring it to this board. And I just literally, it was just hey, I'm going to be talking. If you want to jump in, go ahead. I tried my best to make this exactly what you and I talked about, because other members of this board have asked me for an update. I know Member Dippold did, Member Kennedy did, Mr. Creighton did. I don't recall specifically if Madam Chair Carrie Thompson did, but they were asking me for an update, and that's why I felt it was important. And you and I had a bunch of conversations, so I thought we were on the same page as well about this. And that's what I presented here has been in line with how I understood we talked about. Is there something that I got incorrect, you think?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And I think that certainly I want to work with everyone. I mean, as I've said, Corey, to you, the board, Wayne and I certainly, and Paul to a certain extent have been working. I mean, we started working with Hull 7 years ago on this.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're being diminished by the fact that somebody else is taking control. I'm not a control freak, and I am not somebody who wants to take over. I think this is a collaborative effort, and I am fully involved with that. But we should be fully involved with that. Why would we be given a presentation that was given that we just got like 3 minutes ago that you just got?
So can I just,
I thought that discussion we had
all right,
3 weeks ago, we had agreed at that meeting. I said I would bring this to the board today, and you said you'd bring it to your board as well. My apologies if I misunderstood. I thought that was pretty much a green light from you to say, hey, I can update my board with this stuff. If I misunderstood that, that's on me. But I really thought, well, walking away from that meeting, I had a pretty clear impression that I was okay to at least update my board. Did I misunderstand you there?
Well, maybe I misunderstood what you said, but you know, it's I've been sitting here and like with my board saying to me, what the hell's going on?
All right. Yeah, I'm happy to come to your next board meeting. Yeah, seriously, if you want to just put me on the agenda, we can talk.
What I would like to have happen, and I
okay.
think what should happen on any future meeting, is that whatever we talk about with regards to sewering, Situate, connecting to Hull, whatever, is a public meeting. I mean, I'm getting my my posterior beat in because people are chewing on me because nobody knows what's going on. And everyone is like putting all these sort of rumors and innuendos together to say, well, you guys are doing this, you guys are doing that. Well, no, we're not doing anything yet.
I get
I
this.
think the best way
Yeah,
to.
no, I don't think you two are actually disagreeing.
No, we're on the same page.
And Bill, in all fairness, like we really just wanted to give a quick update because of that, because people have been asking us too. So if you, I mean, Corey and Bill, I don't know what the best way is to proceed here. Bill, I don't want you to
Maybe let Bill speak. He is the chair of the sewer commission. And
Yeah.
every time he makes a point, the two of you are jumping down his throat. Let him speak, please.
What I'm going to say, Jack, is that if Bill
Can't Bill speak for himself?
he can speak for himself, and
Well, let him speak then, please.
I thought he was done making his point, and I was going to offer some suggestions of how to move forward, Jack. Because that's what a chair
Let
is
him
supposed to
speak,
do.
please.
Okay, Bill, do you have another comment you need to make, or can I make some suggestions of how I think we can remedy this miscommunication?
Please do.
So when Corey came to me asking to give an update, I believe he was in the right place about this, just really genuinely wanting to give an update to the board, which we didn't think needed to be an official meeting with sewer commission. If you feel like we need to plan an official meeting, but a joint meeting or a future meeting where you can be more prepared, I'm okay with that. But I genuinely thought it was important just to put this back on this board's radar, because several of us have been getting a lot of questions from people in town just about what's going on in terms of these issues, right? So it was supposed to just be an update of Corey bringing to us what he's heard in your meetings and what he's heard in terms of where we stand on this issue.
Yeah, but well, I'm not going to dispute with you, Chairman or Chairperson. I mean, I'm just going to say that I'm not sure I agree with you 100%. I just think that there has been, you have to understand. So we've been running with this thing. So, you know, we've been like Custer with the flag, you know, charging, and all of a sudden, like, we're like, okay, well, no, you're not doing it anymore. And that's the way we feel. And if that's the way you want us to do, I mean, if that's what's going to happen, tell us that. I understand that Corey's trying to help. I think that's fine. That's great. But we had no idea about this presentation. Nobody told us. You know, communication is the only thing that is really, that we're all should be doing. I mean, we should have been told that this was happening, and we weren't.
I'm sorry if you feel that way. I mean,
no, it's not that I feel that way. That's reality.
Bill, I have to disagree. That's just not factual. We had a discussion. We agreed, you and I, and then I came to your board and I told you, I want you guys to be involved because you need to drive this.
Yes,
and I thought the discussions we had were that. And
you did.
So,
absolutely. I will tell the court that that's what you did. But
okay.
I'll also say that this morning when we talked, or whenever the last meeting, I think, I can't even remember, yesterday or this morning, you told us there was a meeting, but there was no, we didn't get we never got the presentation that you gave us. I would have thought at the very least, common courtesy would have said, you know, why don't I give it to the sewer board so they can look at it and see what's going on.
I mean, we do have liaisons, I will say, Bill, like liaisons of all of our different committees and boards do come back to give updates and briefings to the select board without necessarily always inviting every other committee and board. And it's not any malicious intent. You know what I mean? We're just
I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying that.
right.
No.
So
I'm just saying, I'm asking for common courtesy to let us know what you guys are thinking, what you guys want us to do, and include us in what the deliberations are.
Totally. And Bill, we don't know what we're thinking and we don't know what we want you to do because we haven't been able to discuss this issue or deliberate on this issue for several months now. So in order to be able to tell you those things, we have to be able to talk about it.
Correct.
As a board in a public meeting.
And exactly, I think there should be a public meeting between the select board and the sewer board to go over all this stuff. Because, you know, we have things that have not been surfaced tonight. Like we have thought about a satellite sewer plant, you know, and some other things. I mean, these are things that could mitigate a whole lot of issues for us and still clean up the Gulf. That's all, you know, we're not crazy people. We are here to do the best for the town. And that's the reason we've all joined. I mean, you know, that's the reason all you guys have joined. I mean, you know.
So I just want to pause you and Corey discussing for a minute because Diane and Jean have both had their hands up and I want to get their feedback on how we should proceed on this. Diane and then Jean.
Well, I do think everybody should take a deep breath. It's post-holiday. It's in a very heightened, frustrating environment that we're all living in. So that's A. B, to an earlier conversation we had, an earlier agenda item, it really is important that when we have conversations amongst us, when there's a working board that is involved in it as well, Elm Street or whatever, that we have all the parties there, or at least noticed that there's going to be a discussion at the select board level so that we can get the right representative voices having the conversation together. That was my point earlier. It's my point now. To be fair, the select board got this sewer presentation update a few hours ago. That's completely understandable given the holidays and everything else we all have going on in our lives. We're all volunteers. But I would suggest that we are in no position to take any kind of a vote, which is noticed on the agenda. And I don't think that we should move forward with any kind of vote. I think the update's been given. I hear Bill's concerns. And, you know, I think we just have to be mindful. First of all, we need to be mindful that we're all volunteers doing the best we can for the town, as Bill said. And I also think that, you know, it really behooves us to make sure that the relevant parties are noticed for our meetings so that they can participate in the discussion. And that's all. Thanks.
Okay, Jean.
Well, thank you, Corey, for the presentation. And nice to see you, Bill, and I see that Paul's in the audience too. And so I think I'm just going to give a little feedback on the substance in anticipation of a joint meeting with everyone there, including questions that I have. I would be interested in hearing about alternatives. So Bill and even Paul in the audience, to the extent that there are alternatives out there. That said, I am mindful of the timeline, including the 7 years, because I personally feel pressure not to lose large federal funding opportunities that may be once in a generation that we can participate in, and that we don't want Cohasset to have to, frankly, you know, bear the cost and pass it along to the next 20 years of ratepayers. So like a situation that we have with water, if we can take steps to reasonably avoid it and plan for our future. And so I do have an open mind in terms of a situation with Situate and Hull, recognizing that, you know, there's a lot of considerations in there, but because the federal funding has some, you know, pretty important timelines associated with it, and the political, you know, question marks associated with how long it will last, I do feel pressure to think through this maybe on a perhaps more accelerated timeline, so we don't miss out as not even as a region, really as Cohasset, and have to bear a lot of that cost independently ourselves in the future as we grapple with failing septic systems, et cetera. And so that's what I would put out there in terms of my own impressions from the presentation, but questions I still have, and just some of the atmospherics that are out there that are influencing the way I'm thinking.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Jack.
Yeah, again, it was on the selectmen's packet. And then the actual presentation got in my inbox sometime around 2 o'clock today. Fortunately, I have been following this quite closely for a while. I had asked for updates, but I hadn't gotten them, but I got them through various other sources. Couple of things about the Corey's presentation, and thank you, Corey, for all your work. Yes, it is true that North Situate has a problem, but and it is dribbling into, or more than dribbling into, our beaches. However, it is just like we had to solve at our expense of the town, the Little Harbor issue. It is Situate's responsibility. They are also doing a lot of development in Situate right now. And if they can afford this sewer and that development, I think they can take care of their own sewerage without dumping it onto us and saying they're polluting our harbor and we're responsible for fixing it. I think we probably ought to keep ourselves pretty independent. So, you know, that's the other thing. So although I think we can do something, you know, we are below capacity. I've been following that capacity for a while. We're not in an emergency. We have a very good state-of-the-art plant. We just put some money into it. There's also the thing of putting a satellite plant. What we really need to do as a community is South Main Street. And that is well within our capacity. I also think that it's not a good idea for a small town like Cohasset, right, to be in a situation where we are dependent upon other towns that may or may not like us. They didn't like us with the oyster farms, that we should be self-sufficient to the extent that we can. The good news is, because we do have a good sewer board, we are there now, and we do have plans to keep that way. So I think on a factual basis that we should, you know, keep that, you know, in mind. And I do agree with Jean that this is a time to solve it. If there is federal money around, maybe we put in that satellite plant. It's not that expensive. So I think we're all in good shape. So before we start getting ourselves indebted to communities that may or may not like us when we don't have to, we solve our own problems.
Okay. I mean, Corey, I just want to thank you for the presentation and feel like I don't really know if there's any point in discussing any more of this, because this is played out not in a very productive fashion, I don't think, based on the vibe in the room. So I would propose we schedule a joint meeting between us and Sewer Commission. I don't really feel the need to discuss it further. Corey, what do you think?
I would just, you know, I tried to be, one of the topics that gets brought up, and I'm not quite sure I understand it, is the idea that, you know, we shouldn't be discussing Situate's priorities. And I frankly, I agree with that. I mean, Situate's problems are Situate's problems. However, you know, this is a case where our children are swimming in fecal matter, period. That's it. There is no chapter 2 here. How many years are we okay with our kids getting out of boats and swimming in bacteria that are going to get them sick? How many years is okay? I want to know the number of years, the number of children that have to swim in the harbor, to at which point we say, you know, maybe we'll take care of this. So for me, it's a high priority. I don't really care about Situate. So the fastest way for us to clean up our harbor and stop our children from being exposed to terrible things is to work through something we already have. We already have an agreement with Hull. We can allow Situate to attach. We can clean this stuff up in a year. We could do that if we wanted to get our stuff together and lead on this issue. That's my only priority. I don't, you know, having North Situate come back, that's great. I think that's nice. I think it's going to be supportive. That's not a reason to do this. The reason to do this is to fix the harbor now. We could build another plant. Sure. I don't know how many years it's going to take. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what the neighbors think about it. I don't know how much money it's going to cost. This may be cost neutral for us. This could be literally something that, doesn't cost our town anything, and it cleans up the water that our kids are swimming in. I don't know why that's not the first priority and the only priority. So I'm just a little, I'm passionate about this because we should be passionate about it.
Carrie, could I say one last thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So I've been on the board, I don't know, I forget, 10 years, 9 years, something like that. I joined after being volunteered by several people and part of my thing was to clean up the Gulf River, because I see the stuff that comes out of there, because there's a lot of just open sewer systems within the Gulf. And that prompted me to get involved with this. And I'm not going to get too deep in that. I throw rocks at people because I think that we need to address this as a town, because the harbor is our biggest asset. It is the only jewel that we have. I mean, it is the best. And sometimes we can't use it, as Corey said. It's like uninhabitable. I would just ask that in any future communications or any future like meetings, whatever, that the board is involved physically, and that whatever we do is public, because the board is getting, we're getting a lot, I'm sure you guys are getting the same thing. We're getting lots of chewing about, South Main Street. What are you doing about the harbor? What are you doing about this? We don't know. And we have certainly been involved with a lot of things. And then after, sort of COVID stopped all the meetings in Situate, we haven't done anything. I just think that all the sort of meetings that are happening without us being involved have to stop. We have to be involved. One of us can show up at any time. We're all available. And I think that it would make a more collegial environment, and that we can go ahead with doing what we think we should do for the betterment of the town. My end of my story.
Yeah, I wish we had a collegial environment too, Bill. And I think that in the future, we need to plan.
We can.
So, well, I believe our next step is to have a joint meeting with select board and sewer.
Yep.
Who else has their hand up? Jack?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Corey, about the harbor. I'm the liaison to the harbor. I'm a member of a couple of organizations on the harbor. I'm a regular user of it. I think it is very, very disappointing that what's coming in. And I do think that the state needs to do the same thing to Situate that the state did to Cohasset when we dragged our feet. And we shouldn't have to sacrifice and deal with stuff on our point when it is a Situate's failure to act. And if anything, we should certainly be writing letters to our state reps, and we should go to the state rep. We should go to the state rep in Situate, and we should go to the state rep from Cohasset and Hull. And we should ask them to find out why the state is allowing Situate to get away with, polluting public waters. And I think that's something we could do concretely. And I think it should be done. And I think the representatives that are representing our respective communities should be demanding that the pollution be cleaned up. And we should not be feeling that because Situate pollutes that we have to fix it. And I think that that's something in the short term we certainly could do. We should be, contacting the state environmental protection people, and we should ask, what are you doing about it? And there's federal issues. We should be asking, what are you doing about it? And I don't know who the rep is in Situate, but certainly he should be putting pressure on, or she, and Joan Machino and our state senator. We should be asking them to do something. And maybe Situate needs some of the Gene's money to fix what their problem is, but that's fine. But let's not sacrifice ours for other towns' responsibilities. And I do agree, Corey, that it is a serious problem. I am not denigrating that. I'm committed to the harbor. And I think you have a good point. We need to do that. My point is that is not something a burden that we need to shoulder, that what we could be looking for is how come we were held to this strict standard and other communities are getting away with it now.
So if someone asks us about what we're doing, we're going to say, oh, call your senator. I mean, that's just not, I don't think that should be our position as a board. I think we need to lead on this. I don't think we
And
passed the
lead
buck. I
by,
think
should
we
we
need
treat,
to lead.
should we treat Situate sewage?
I mean, I actually think we need to hold off on these more substantive debates till we have a joint meeting with Stewart. Diane, I don't know what you think.
That's what I was going to say. I agree with Corey. I don't want to lose time. I think this is one of the most important things we have to do. And I think that we should have a joint meeting ASAP. And I also just want to say that with respect to the second amended judgment, it really fell on the individual homeowners, other than the legal fees that were paid by the town. Ultimately,
Right.
the burden ended up being on the individuals. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah.
Nope, I think we should move on.
Yeah, all right, so
I
we'll be
do.
scheduling a joint meeting and there's nothing further to discuss on this tonight. All right,
All right,
moving
thank you,
on.
guys. Thank you.
Chris, town manager update.
So a couple of quick updates, and then I'll talk about the calendar. First, I just want to acknowledge Jen Oram tonight for her years of service to Cohasset. It's been my good fortune to work with Jen from my very first day here. She's been a really invaluable asset to the select board, the zoning board, the planning board, all kinds of licensed and permanent applicants, Cohasset citizens. And I wish her, and all of us wish her, she takes on a new position in Hingham. Her last day with us is Wednesday, though she'll help with the zoning board until we have a new, we actually have an ad out, and there's a new assistant planner position that'll kind of fill that gap. So, but I did just want to take this moment publicly to thank Jen for her service and wish her all the best, even though she's only going next door. All the best.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Yay.
I want to note that Cohasset has officially received a few things are kind of COVID delayed, but the government finance officers has officially awarded the town an award for our 2021 FY21 budget book, which is very exciting, and our FY20 financial statement. So we won the award for our CAFR and for our budget book. These are two affirmations of the town's strong fiscal operations. And I really want to thank everyone who's made those documents possible, particularly Finance Director Don Pyatt and Treasurer Collector Paul Linares, but also all of you and all the members of the advisory board who made Cohasset's finances a critically important central role on that financial strong footing. The town can do lots and lots of other things. So it takes a lot of work. And that said, I appreciate all the time and energy that everyone gives to making that possible. That allows all the other exciting work that goes on here to take place. I've also circulated to you officially a draft calendar that kind of lays out the next 4 months. We're kind of starting. I mean, I know it's the beginning of a new year. We're at the start of an exciting time. There's 4 months of a lot of activity. So in 2 weeks, we'll officially present the first draft of the town budget, proposed FY23 budget for all of you. I know I said FY22 here. The reason it's a draft, I have to make sure I correct little mistakes. The enterprise fund budgets will be coming in after that, and they'll be presented in a joint meeting. The plan is to do that in early March, give everyone time to fit those. The citizen petition deadline for annual town meeting will be February 14th. We already have requests out for boards, committees, and departments who have non-budget or non-capital items, just to give us ideas of things that they're looking for in the warrant. Hopefully we'll have those, the plan is to have those in the next 2 weeks. So we have kind of a rough idea of what will be on the warrant. And we'll circle back with a draft warrant to start conversations in February. So the dates still have to be firmed up. Carrie, I'll have to talk with you and the other chairs there's been a lot of very successful joint meetings, water and sewer budgets, citizens petitions. We've done joint meetings on the capital budget, CPC, and the school budget. If we do it in this format, it's one way. Hopefully by then we'll be able to get back in person and maybe do some in-person meetings. We'll have to see how that all plays out. Some of the specifics of where people will be are to be determined, but there's kind of a rollout of dates. The month of March will be busy. It's already tentatively scheduled to have a meeting pretty much every Tuesday that month. And then the goal is to have this wrapped up by the very first meeting of April. So it's all done roughly a month before the warrant, the town meeting actually takes place, which is May 2nd. So that's what's been circulated. If anyone has any questions or updates like the mistake I just found myself, please pass them along. If there's any dates that we need to avoid, if anyone has a travel, an anniversary, birthday, family event, whatever, let me know. We could try to adjust and adapt. But again, the meetings are tentatively scheduled for Tuesdays. They're just easier that way because all of you work that way already. I just want to wish everybody a very happy New Year. Thank you for I want to thank all of you personally for all your work with me and on behalf of the town. And I look forward to a very exciting calendar year 22 and the beginning of FY 23, because we're always looking a year ahead. So thank you and happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Okay, select board comments.
I'll combine Chris, I just wanted to say that sometimes I do ask you some pointed questions, but that doesn't mean that I don't like you. It's just, I kind of do that. So don't take it personally. I think you work pretty hard for the town and you have a pretty comprehensive sense of what's going on. So I wanted to say that. The other thing on my comment, I'd like to publicly thank a lot of the people who've sent me various emails and texts in support. I know sometimes in my questions, they're pointed and sometimes I ruffle feathers. Sometimes ruffling feathers might be not quite accurate, but I do that because I care about this town and I also care about self-government, and sometimes self-government and democracy and openness does require asking questions that may be unsettling in some quarters. I get asked questions that are unsettling to me. I've been on a lot of boards and commissions. We've asked questions when on my position as the bylaw reforms, we got asked a lot of unsettling questions by the people at the special town meeting. And that's good. That's healthy. So, but we all do care about this town, and that's what unites us. So let's remember, this is a wonderful town. We're privileged to live here, and let's all work together. And it's all right to ask tough questions, but just remember, underneath it all, we're all friends, or at least not trying to kill each other.
Okay. Jack, I thought you were asking a question to Chris, but I assume that was also your.
Oh, no, I started that, but then I morphed into it. So I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. My only reminder is next week is supposed to be our meeting talking about just communication planning and communication strategy. It was supposed to be in person, but obviously it's going to be held on Zoom. For the time being, we are heeding our Board of Health and keeping meetings on Zoom for the month of January. We can further assess that once we get further on in the month, but just a reminder that this next Tuesday is not a normal select board meeting. It will just be about communication. Other comments, I guess, Corey, Jean, and Diane.
Lots of thoughts, not a lot of clarity. I think the board, we need to, I just encourage my colleagues to the concept of 2 ears, 1 mouth. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of good work all over the town, and I think we all could listen a little better. That way we don't run into this so much. I'm going to try to do a better job of that myself, and I encourage everyone else to do the same. I hope everyone has a good 2022. Here's to not 2021 again. Thanks.
Jean.
I'm going to keep it short. I hope that everyone had a happy holiday, including my fellow board members. And I hope everyone stays healthy. I hope our schools remain open. And so I really hope that everyone takes maximum steps to help each other, sort of along the lines of Corey's comment. And, here's to hoping that we turn the corner in 2022 on the pandemic, but also, try to find better ways. And maybe this is a part of our communication meeting on trying to make progress on some issues to help narrow the gaps, to see where, we can compromise and move forward, including in, a lot of these long-term issues that we've been working towards.
Diane.
I'll just mention that the MMA conference is, and I think everyone signed up for it, and it does cost a lot of money. So I hope everybody will make a point of attending. It's really valuable. They are going to be requiring vaccine cards at the door, and they are going to test everybody on site before they're allowed into the Heinz Convention Center. So they're really being very aggressive about that. And hopefully that will make for a good in-person conference. I do think that we were talking today at a Maya board meeting that we're hopeful that things will be a little bit better in a couple of weeks, and we can only hope. So yes, here's to a better 2022. It's the only ways up. So good night. I'm done.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, so moved. My God. Come on, Corey.
All right. We have two motions, so I'm just going to count one of those as a second. Starting with Jack, roll call vote to adjourn.
Jack Creighton, adjourn, aye.
Ray Evans, aye.
Jean Haley Dipple.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye. Good
Night.
night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.